I've loved someone else all along." Michael Anderson said it into a live microphone on their 10th anniversary in front of 200 people who had come to celebrate the marriage he had just set on fire. He didn't whisper it. He didn't take Emily aside. He raised his champagne, smiled at the room like a man accepting an award, and told his wife that every year she gave him had been a placeholder for someone else. His own father dropped a glass. Emily didn't move. If you believe some people deserve to be told the truth before the whole room hears it, subscribe to the channel and stay with this story all the way to the end. And comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The band had stopped playing 11 seconds earlier because Michael had asked them to. That detail mattered later when Emily reconstructed the night in her head over and over the way you replay a car accident, looking for the moment you could have turned the wheel. He had asked them to stop. He had planned this. A man doesn't cue a room by accident. "Can I have everyone's attention?" Michael had said, tapping the side of his glass with a ring he still wore. "Just for a minute. Emily, come here. Come stand next to me." And she had come because that was what she did. 10 years of coming when he called. She crossed the floor with her hand already reaching for his elbow, and she was smiling because 200 people were watching, and Emily Carter had spent a decade making sure Michael Anderson never looked bad in a room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael said, "I want to thank you all for coming. 10 years. 10 years is a long time." Someone in the back whistled, Emily's brother Ben probably. There was laughter, warm and easy, the laughter of people holding drinks who expect nothing but a nice speech and a slice of cake. 10 years is long enough, Michael said, that you learn what's true and what isn't. Emily's friend Rachel would later say she felt it right then in her spine before a single word landed. She said Michael's voice changed pitch. She said it went flat the way a man's voice goes flat when he's reading from something he's already rehearsed in the car. "I've spent a lot of my life pretending," Michael said, "and I'm done pretending." Emily leaned in slightly, still smiling, and murmured, "Michael, what are you doing?" He didn't look at her. "I need to tell you the truth," he said. And now he did turn, and his eyes were strange and bright and almost relieved. And that was the part that would haunt her most, because a man who confesses in agony is a man who lost a war with himself. But a man who confesses with relief is a man who's been waiting to hand you the bill. "I've loved someone else all along." Nobody moved. 200 people, and not one of them made a sound. There is a kind of silence that isn't the absence of noise, it's the presence of shock, and it has a weight, and it pressed down on that ballroom like a hand on the back of a neck. Emily's mother, Joan, set down her fork. Michael's father. Frank, 73 years old, 4 years past the surgery that should have killed him, let a champagne flute slide out of his fingers, and it hit the floor, and it did not break, it just rolled, and the sound of that glass rolling across the floor was the loudest thing in Chicago. Emily's smile was still on her face. That was the horrible part. Her body hadn't caught up yet. Her face was still doing what it had been trained to do. "Michael," she said quietly, "put the glass down." "No," he said. "No, I'm not doing this quietly anymore. I've done everything quietly for 10 years. "You've done everything quietly," she repeated. "I have." "Say that again." "Emily." "No, say it again." Her voice didn't rise. That was what everyone noticed afterward. Rachel said she'd expected screaming. Ben said he'd expected Emily to slap him. Instead, Emily's voice went low and steady and terribly polite, the voice of a woman asking a contractor to explain the invoice. "You told 200 people you love someone else. You cued the band, so finish it." "Who?" Michael's jaw worked. "Don't do this here," he said, and Emily laughed. One note. Not amused. It came out of her like a cough. "Don't do this here," she said. "Michael, you did this here. I'm trying to be honest with you. You're trying to be honest with me in a room with my mother in it." She held out her hand. "Give me the microphone. Emily, give me the microphone." He held it away from her, and that was the first moment the room turned, because everyone saw it. Everyone saw a man physically keep a microphone away from his wife at their own anniversary party, and something in the crowd shifted from shock to something with teeth in it. "Her name is Sophia," Michael said. Sophia Bennett. Emily's hand stopped in midair. She knew the name. Of course she knew the name. She had heard it 100 times in the early years back when Michael was broke and drunk on cheap beer on their apartment floor, telling her about the girl he'd known before the one who left, the one who went to New York and never called. Emily had listened to those stories. Emily had held him through those stories. Emily had said she didn't deserve you and meant it. And Michael had put his head in her lap and said, "You're the only person who ever believed in me," and she had believed that he believed it. "Sophia Bennett," Emily said. "Yes." "The girl from Northwestern?" "Yes." "The one you cried about?" Michael's face flushed. "That's not—" "On the floor of the apartment on Ainsley," Emily said. "You were 29. You cried about her for 2 hours and I made you eggs at 4 in the morning because you hadn't eaten in a day and a half. That's Sophia." Emily, stop. "I'm asking a question." She turned slightly, and now she was speaking to the room as much as to him, and she didn't need a microphone because nobody in that ballroom was breathing. "How long—" "That's not the point. How long, Michael?" "I said that's not—" "How long?" It cracked. Just once. Just that once her voice broke open, and the sound of it made Joan Carter stand up out of her chair, and made Rachel start moving through the tables, and made Michael flinch backward half a step like the word had physical mass. And into that half second of silence from a table on the left side of the room, a woman said, "Michael." Emily turned. She had been at the party for 2 hours. Sophia Bennett was standing at table 9 with a napkin still in her hand, and her face the color of paper. Emily had seated her. That was the thing. Emily had seated her personally because Michael had said, "There's a consultant from the New York firm, she's in town. It'd be rude not to invite her." And Emily had said, "Of course, bring her. We'll put her with the Mallorys. They're friendly." And Emily had written the name Sophia Bennett on a place card in her own handwriting with a gold pen at her own kitchen table 11 days ago. She had written it herself. Emily looked at the woman. The woman looked back. And in that look, something passed between them that no man in that room could have read, because Sophia Bennett's face was not the face of a woman who had won. It was the face of a woman who had just been shot. "Michael," Sophia said again, and her voice was shaking. "What are you doing?" "I'm telling the truth," Michael said. "Finally, I'm telling them the truth." "You told me—" Sophia stopped. She looked around at 200 faces. She put the napkin down very carefully like it was made of glass. "You told me she knew." The room made a noise, a collective intake low and ugly. "You told me you'd already talked to her," Sophia said. "You told me you'd been separated for a year. You told me tonight was a formality for the families." Michael's mouth opened. Nothing came out of it. Emily felt the floor tilt, not from grief, from arithmetic. Because a lie told to one woman is an affair. A lie told to 2 women in opposite directions, maintained and parallel engineered, so neither one ever compares notes, that is not an affair. That is a project. That takes work. That takes calendar management. That takes a man waking up every morning and choosing deliberately before coffee who he was going to be a liar to today. "A year," Emily said. Sophia's eyes came to her, and they were wet, and she said, "I'm going to be sick." "A year," Emily said again to Michael. "It isn't like that." "Then tell me what it's like." Emily's hands were perfectly still at her sides. "Tell me right now in front of your father what it's like." And Frank Anderson stood up, 73 years old. He put one hand on the table and pushed himself up out of the chair, and it cost him something. Everyone could see it cost him. And he stood there in the suit Emily had picked out for him because his hands didn't work well enough anymore for buttons, and he said in a voice like gravel, "Michael, sit down." "Dad, I said sit down. You don't understand." "I understand fine." Frank's hand was shaking on the tablecloth. "I understand that you're standing up there breaking that girl in half in front of everyone she loves and calling it honesty. I've been alive 73 years, and I have never once seen a coward look so proud of himself." Diane Anderson pulled at her husband's sleeve. Frank, sit down your heart." "My heart's fine," Frank said. "It's fine because of her." He pointed at Emily. He pointed at Emily with a hand that had a tremor in it, and his voice went thin, and everyone heard it. "Do you people know what she did? Do you know what that girl did?" "Frank," Emily said softly. Don't. 4 years ago, Frank said I was dying. That's not a figure of speech. Insurance denied the procedure, denied it twice. And I told my son I'd made peace with it. And my son said he'd figure something out. And my son didn't figure anything out because he was busy up. Dad, stop. And then one Tuesday, a woman from the hospital calls and says my balance is settled. Frank's eyes were wet now. Settled. I said, by who? She said the family took care of it. And I thought my son took care of it. For 4 years, I have been telling people at church that my son saved my life. Nobody in the room was drinking anymore. It was her, Frank said. It was her savings, her grandmother's money. She emptied it, and she told the hospital not to tell me, and she let my son take the credit, and I only found out because I got a piece of mail with her name on it 18 months ago, and I never said a word because she asked me not to. He looked at his son. You let me thank you, Frank said. At Christmas, you let me stand up at my own table and thank you. Michael's face had gone gray. Dad, I was going to pay her back. And Emily said, don't. It cut through the room. Don't you dare, she said, make this about money. Don't you dare give these people something clean to think about. You want to be honest, be honest. You didn't tell me the truth tonight because you respect me. You told me tonight because you wanted an audience. That's not fair, isn't it? She took one step toward him. You could have told me this morning, in our kitchen. You could have told me last week. You could have told me any of the 400 mornings you sat across from me and let me pour your coffee. Why tonight, Michael? Why in front of my mother? He said nothing. Say it, Emily said, because I already know, but say it, Emily. Because if you told me alone, she said, I would have asked you questions, and you can't answer questions. You can only make speeches. So you waited for a room because in a room whoever talks first is the honest one and everyone else is just reacting. You didn't confess tonight. You performed. Rachel reached her then and put a hand on Emily's arm and hissed, Em, let's go. Right now. Let's just go. No, Emily said. Emily, no. She didn't take her eyes off her husband. I've been leaving rooms for 10 years so he wouldn't be embarrassed. I'm not leaving this one. And here is where the room learned who Emily Carter actually was. Because Michael Cornard did what cornered men do. He went for the throat. You want to do this here? He said. Fine, let's do it here. He turned to the room, and he was flushed now, and his voice had gone up half an octave. You all think she's a saint. Everybody thinks Emily's a saint. You know what it's like to live with a saint? You know what it's like to be rescued every single day of your life, to have somebody hand you your own life back every morning like it's a favor. Michael, his mother said. Michael, that's enough. She never needed me, Michael shouted. Not once. 10 years, and she never needed me for a single thing. You know what that does to a man? And Emily said very quietly, I needed you in March. He stopped. I needed you in March, she said. When the doctor called me at 2 p.m. and told me the word biopsy, and I sat in the car in the parking garage for 40 minutes trying to reach you, you didn't pick up. You didn't pick up 11 times. The silence had teeth in it now. I needed you in March, Emily said, and you were in a hotel on Michigan Avenue. Sophia Bennett sat down, just sat hard in her chair like her legs had quit. It was benign, Emily said. In case anyone's wondering, I found out alone on a Thursday, and I drove home and I made dinner, and when you came in at 9, you said the traffic was bad, and I said, that's too bad, honey, and I passed you the potatoes. Her voice never rose. So no, don't tell this room I never needed you. Tell this room you weren't there when I did. Joan Carter was crying. Ben had both fists on the table. Greg Mallory, Michael's business partner of 6 years, had gone very still, and had not looked up from his plate in 90 seconds, and Emily noticed that. Emily noticed it and filed it. That's not... Michael's voice cracked. You never told me about that. When? Emily said. When exactly? Should I have texted you? Would that have been a good week? I would have come. You didn't come. I didn't know. You didn't pick up, Emily said. There's a difference between not knowing and not picking up, and you have spent 10 years living in that difference. And tonight you finally ran out of room. Somebody in the back of the room started clapping. One person. It stopped immediately because it was the wrong sound for what this was. but it happened, and it told everybody something about which way the room had turned. Michael put the microphone down on the table. "I want a divorce," he said. And Emily said, "I know. I'm not going to apologize for wanting a life." "I know," Emily said. "I've known for 4 months." Michael's head came up. "What, 4 months," Emily said. "Since March 14th, since the parking garage." "You're lying." "Am I?" Emily tilted her head. "You had a haircut on March 19th. You've had the same barber for 8 years, Michael, and suddenly you're going somewhere in River North that charges $90. You started running. You bought a watch. You started saying, 'Let's circle back to me in our house to me,' like I was a client. You put a passcode on your phone for the first time in a decade, and when I asked you why, you said, and I quote, 'The firm requires it now.'" She smiled, and there was no warmth anywhere in it. "The firm has 11 employees, and one of them is you." Rachel let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "You knew," Michael said. "I knew in March. I was sure in April." Emily's voice stayed level. "In May, I stopped guessing and started reading." "Reading what?" And that was when the temperature of the room changed because Emily didn't answer right away. She let it sit. She let the question hang there and turn slowly in the air, and Michael Anderson, who had walked into that ballroom absolutely certain that he was the only person in it holding a secret, felt the ground move underneath him for the first time in 10 years. "Emily," he said, "reading what? Ask me tomorrow," she said. No, you don't get to do that. You don't get to say something like that in front of—" He looked around wildly. "Reading what? You want to talk about honesty in front of 200 people," Emily said. "Okay, let's talk about honesty in front of 200 people. Greg." Greg Mallory's head snapped up like he'd been shot. "Greg," Emily said pleasantly, "you look pale. Are you all right?" Yeah, Em, I'm fine." "Greg was at the hotel, too," Emily said to nobody in particular. "Not like that. Greg was in the lobby. Greg was in the lobby on March 14th at 2:40 in the afternoon because Greg had a 2 o'clock with Michael that Michael didn't show up for. Isn't that right, Greg?" Greg Mallory said nothing. "That's what I thought," Emily said. "This is insane," Michael said. "This is Emily, you're humiliating yourself." "Am I?" "You're standing in front of everyone we know acting like some kind of detective." "I'm standing in front of everyone we know," Emily said, "because you put me here. You wanted the room. You've got the room. What's the matter, Michael? You're not enjoying it." And then for the first time all night, she moved toward him. 1 step, 2, close enough that when she spoke again, only the 4 nearest tables could hear it, but those 4 tables heard every word, and every one of them repeated it later, and that's how it got around, and that's how it eventually got back to him. "You said you've loved someone else all along," Emily said. "I believe you. I actually believe you. But it isn't Sophia." Michael blinked. "What?" "It was never Sophia." Emily's eyes were completely dry now. "Sophia's a costume. Sophia's what a man puts on when he's tired of the person he actually is. You didn't fall in love with a woman, Michael. You fell in love with a version of yourself that never had to say thank you." Something in his face came apart. "Because that's what I was," Emily said. "For 10 years I was the receipt. Every time you looked at me, you saw the itemized list of everything you didn't do yourself. Your father's surgery, the 2017 payroll, the second lease, the lawyer in April of 2016. You couldn't love me because you couldn't stand what I knew." "Emily, stop it. And Sophia doesn't know any of it," Emily said. "That's the whole appeal. She met you at 39 with a good suit and a company and a story where you built it all yourself. Of course you love her. She's the only person alive who believes your version." Sophia Bennett stood up. Everyone turned. She was crying. Openly, without any attempt to hide it. Mascara gone 40 years old and standing in a ballroom full of strangers who had watched her be turned into a punchline in under 6 minutes. "I didn't know," she said. "I believe you," Emily said. "He said you had lawyers. He said you had lawyers. He said the papers were filed in February." "There are no papers," Emily said. "I asked him to prove it." Sophia said. Her voice was climbing. 2 weeks ago, I asked him, I said, Michael, show me one document, and he said, I was being cold. He said I was being unromantic. He said, if I loved him, I wouldn't need... She pressed her hand flat against her mouth and held it there for a second and got herself back. I flew here to meet his family. I thought I was meeting his family. You were seated at table 9, Emily said, between Karen and Doug Mallory. I wrote your place card. Sophia made a sound like something tearing. He gave me your name 3 weeks ago, Emily said. He said you were a consultant. He said it would be rude not to invite you. Oh my God. I use the gold pen, Emily said. I do all the cards in gold pen. And Sophia Bennett turned and looked at Michael Anderson with an expression that Emily would remember for the rest of her life, because it was the exact expression Emily was not allowing herself to have, and seeing it on someone else's face was like watching a surgery on your own body from across the room. You had me sit at table 9, Sophia said. Sophia, you had her write my name. I was going to tell you tonight. You were going to tell me tonight. Sophia laughed. It was horrible. Tell me what, Michael? That you were going to do it in front of 200 people that I'd get to watch? Is that what this was? Was I supposed to be moved? I was choosing you, Michael shouted. I was choosing you in front of everybody. Do you know what that costs a man? Do I know what it costs? Sophia's voice went to pieces. You didn't choose me. You used me. You used me to have a scene. You've been building this for a year so you could stand up here and be the brave one. She grabbed her purse off the table. Her hands were shaking so badly she dropped it, and it went everywhere. And Rachel, of all people, bent down and picked up her lipstick and handed it back to her. And Sophia said, "Thank you," automatically, and started crying harder. "Sophia, wait! Don't!" She was already moving. "Don't you follow me. Don't you call me. I mean it, Michael. Don't you dare call me." And she was gone, and the doors swung, and the room had a new silence in it, a sick and settled one. Michael stood there. 200 people, his father on his feet with a shaking hand, his mother crying into a napkin, his wife 3 feet away with dry eyes. "Well," Emily said, "don't. You just lost her too. Emily, don't." "I'm not gloating," Emily said, and the awful thing was that she meant it. The awful thing was that there was something almost like pity in her voice, and Michael heard it, and it destroyed him more thoroughly than screaming would have. "I'm telling you what just happened because I don't think you can see it. She didn't leave because you love me. She left because she just found out what you're willing to do to a woman when the room's watching. And she did the math." "What math?" "She realized she's next," Emily said. "In 4 years and 6, when she stops being the version of you that doesn't need thanking, she's next." Michael's hands were shaking now. "You planned this," he said. "You knew she was here. You knew this whole thing was—" "I planned the seating," Emily said. "You planned the confession. You've been setting me up." "Michael." And now, finally, something came into her voice that had not been there all night. Not anger, something older and colder. "For 4 months, I have been getting up at 6 and making your breakfast, and asking how the Kellerman deal is going, and listening to you lie to me across a table with your mouth full. I have kissed you goodbye. I have picked up your dry cleaning. I did that for 120 days, and I did it every day on purpose because I wanted to know one thing." She let it hang. "What?" Michael said. "Whether you'd ever choose me," Emily said, "if you had the chance. Not if I caught you, not if I begged, not if I cried in the kitchen and made it easy for you to be the good guy. If nobody made you. If you just woke up one morning and chose." Michael's mouth opened. "You had 120 chances," Emily said. "That was the whole test. That was the entire thing. And you used every single one of them to plan tonight." Joan Carter was standing now. Ben was standing. Half the room was standing without having decided to. "So no," Emily said. "I didn't set you up. I gave you 4 months and a room full of people who love you, and you did all of this yourself, and now you have to live inside it. That's not a setup, Michael. That's just consequences arriving on time for once in your life." She reached up. Everyone saw her do it. Every single person in that ballroom watched Emily Carter's hand go to her left hand, and then she stopped. She stopped and she lowered her hand and she left the ring exactly where it was. And somehow that was worse for him than taking it off would have been, because taking it off would have been an ending, and leaving it on meant she wasn't finished. "Not yet," she said. "What?" "You'll get it," Emily said. "Not in front of them. You don't get to have that too." Emily. "There's a folder," she said. Michael went absolutely still. "There's a folder in the safe deposit box at the Wells Fargo on Clark," Emily said. "The one you've never been to, the one you signed the second signature card for in 2016 and never asked about again, because in 2016 you would have signed anything anybody put in front of you, and I know that Michael, because I was the one holding the pen." The color left his face in a single sweep. Rachel said afterward it was like watching water drain out of a sink. "What's in the folder?" he said. "You know what's in the folder." "Emily, what's in the folder?" "Page 4, Emily said. And Michael Anderson, 39 years old, a respected businessman, a man who had cued a band, took an actual step backward. "You said you never read it," he whispered. "I said I never needed to read it," Emily said. "That was in 2016. You should ask yourself what changed." Greg Mallory stood up so fast his chair went over backward and he said, "Mike." And Michael didn't even look at him. And everybody in the 4 nearest tables understood in the same instant that whatever page 4 was, Greg Mallory knew about it and had known about it and had sat through this entire dinner with it in his throat. "Sit down, Greg," Emily said without turning around. "You've done enough sitting. What's one more hour?" Greg sat down. Michael's voice when it came was almost nothing. "You wouldn't." "Michael," Emily said, "you just told 200 people, including your dying father, that 10 years of my life were a placeholder. You seated your girlfriend at table 9 and let me write her name in gold pen. You asked the band to stop." She leaned in, and her voice went so soft that only he heard the last part, and he would hear it every night for a very long time. "I don't think you're in any position to tell me what I would or wouldn't do." She stepped back. She turned to the room. 200 faces. Her mother, her brother, her friends. The man's father still standing, still shaking, still on his feet for her. "I'm sorry about the cake," Emily said. "It's from Petrosi's. It's really good. Please eat it." And that broke something. Somebody laughed, a wet, horrified laugh, and Joan Carter made a noise into her napkin, and Frank Anderson said, "Emily," in a voice that had absolutely nothing left in it, and Emily crossed the room and took the old man's shaking hand in both of hers and said, "You sit down now. You've done your part." "I didn't know," Frank said. "Sweetheart, I swear to God I didn't know." "I know you didn't. He's my son." "I know. He's my son, and I don't know who he is." "Yeah," Emily said. "That makes 2 of us." She walked toward the doors. Nobody stopped her. The crowd opened the way crowds do, and she went through it, and her heels were the only sound in the entire room, and she got all the way to the doors before Michael found his voice. "Emily." She stopped. She didn't turn around. "Emily, you're not thinking. You're upset and you're not thinking. You'll call me tomorrow." And Emily Carter said to the doors in a voice that carried to the very back of that ballroom, "No, Michael, tomorrow you'll call me, and you'll find out that for the first time in 10 years, I'm not the one who picks up." She got as far as the parking garage before her hands started shaking. Rachel found her there at 11:40, sitting sideways in the passenger seat of her own car, with the door open and both feet on the concrete, holding her phone in both hands like it was something she'd caught. "Em, I'm fine." "You're not fine. Nobody's fine. Ben's about to punch a valet." "Tell Ben the valet didn't do anything." "Ben knows that." Rachel crouched down. "Em, look at me. What was in that folder?" Emily didn't answer. "Emily." "Rachel, I love you," Emily said, "and I need you to not ask me that tonight." "Okay? I need you to not ask me for about 4 days." "Okay?" Rachel said. 4 days. She sat down on the concrete in a $400 dress without a second of hesitation, which was, Emily thought, the entire reason she'd known Rachel for 22 years. "Can I ask something else?" Yeah. Are you going to eat anything because you didn't eat? I watched you all night. You did the rounds and you refilled everybody's water and you sat down twice for a total of 6 minutes and you didn't put one thing in your mouth. Emily started laughing. It came up out of her wrong the way it does when a body can't decide, and it turned into something else about 4 seconds in, and Rachel got both arms around her right there on the floor of a parking garage and held on while Emily Carter finally came apart. And it lasted 90 seconds and then it stopped, and Emily sat up and wiped her face with the heel of her hand and said in an almost normal voice, "There's 140 portions of cake in there." "I know. Petrossi's needs a 2-week lead. I put the deposit down in June." "I know, honey." "He asked the band to stop," Emily said. That's the part I can't." She pressed her palm flat against her chest hard, like she was holding something in place. He walked over to Danny, and he asked him to stop playing. He planned the silence, Rachel. He wanted quiet for it. Rachel said very quietly, "I want to kill him." "Yeah," Emily said. "Get in line. Your number's 91. Her phone lit up at 11:52. Michael. They both looked at it. It buzzed against the concrete face up his name, and a photograph from 4 summers ago in Door County, where he had his arm around her, and they were both squinting into the sun. "Don't," Rachel said. "I'm not going to." "Em, I mean it." "Rachel." Emily watched it ring out. It stopped. It started again 11 seconds later. It stopped. It started again. "I'm not going to." It rang 14 times between 11:52 and 12:20. Emily didn't touch it once. At 12:21, a text came through and she read it without picking it up because she didn't want to hold it while she read it. "I know you're angry. I know. But we have to talk about the box. Please, just tell me you haven't opened it." Rachel read it upside down and said, "Emily, what is in the box?" 4 days, Emily said. The second call came at 7 in the morning, and it wasn't from Michael. "Emily Carter. Speaking. This is Sophia Bennett." Emily sat down on the edge of her bed in a house that still smelled like his cologne and said nothing for 4 full seconds. "I'm at O'Hare," Sophia said. "My flight's at 9:40. I've been sitting at this gate since 4 in the morning, and I have started this phone call 11 times and hung up 11 times, and I need you to understand that I'm not calling because I want anything. I don't want anything. I will never contact you again after this. Okay? I need to tell you something and then I'm going to hang up." "Okay." "I didn't know you existed," Sophia said. "Not the real you, not until last night." Emily's hand went very tight on the phone. "I'm going to say this fast because if I go slow, I'm going to fall apart in a terminal," Sophia said. "He came back to me in September, 14 months ago, a conference in New York. He walked up to me at a bar with a glass of wine and said, 'You're the one that got away, you know that.' And I laughed at him. I want you to know that. I laughed in his face and I said, 'Michael, you're wearing a wedding ring.'" "What did he say?" "He said, 'Am I?'" Emily closed her eyes. "And he took it off," Sophia said, "right in front of me. He put it in his jacket pocket like it was a receipt he didn't need, and he said, 'It's a formality. It's been over for 2 years. We're waiting until my dad passes so it doesn't kill him.'" "His father is going to outlive us all," Emily said. "I know that now. His father stood up last night." "I saw," Sophia said, and her voice cracked all the way open. "I saw. That old man stood up for you, and I sat there at table 9 with a place card you wrote, and I—" She stopped. Emily could hear an airport in the background, a woman's voice announcing a gate change to Milwaukee. "He told me you had lawyers. He told me you were cold. He told me you'd stop touching him in 2019. We were in Door County in 2022, Emily said. "There's a picture. He has it on his phone. He's smiling in it." "I've seen his phone," Sophia said. "There are no pictures on his phone. There's nothing on his phone, Emily. Not one photograph of a single human being. It's the cleanest phone I've ever seen in my life, and I never once asked myself why." Emily got up and walked to the window and stood there with her forehead against the glass. "Why are you telling me this?" she said. "Because I asked him for proof," Sophia said. 2 weeks ago, I said, "Michael, one document, one page, a filing number, anything," and he told me that a woman who really loved him wouldn't need paperwork. "That's a good line," Emily said. "He's got a lot of good lines." And I believed it. Sophia was crying now and not hiding it. 40 years old. 40 years old, and I let a man tell me that asking a question was a failure of love. Do you know what I've been thinking about all night? I've been thinking about a woman I never met writing my name in gold pen at her kitchen table. Emily didn't say anything. He came to my apartment, Sophia said. After last night. Emily opened her eyes. What? He came straight from the ballroom, 11:15, maybe 11:20. He was pounding on my door. He had flowers. Emily, he stopped and bought flowers. He destroyed your life in front of 200 people, and then he stopped at a shop on Clark Street. What did he say? He said we were free. Emily made a sound. It wasn't a word. He said, it's done. I did it. It's just us now. Like it was a gift. Like he'd brought me something. Sophia's voice went flat and strange. And I stood in my own doorway, and I looked at him, and I said, Michael, what did you think was going to happen? And he said, I thought you'd be proud of me. Proud? Emily repeated. Proud. He wanted you to be proud of him. I told him no, Sophia said. Emily's forehead came off the glass. I told him I couldn't be with someone who could do that to a person and call it courage. I told him if he'd do that to a woman who paid for his father's surgery, I couldn't imagine what he'd do to me on a bad Tuesday in 8 years. She took a breath that shook. And Emily, he didn't argue. That's what I need you to know. He didn't fight for me. He didn't cry. He stood in my hallway for about 10 seconds, and then his whole face just reset, like a screen going blank, like the negotiation was over, and he was already on the next thing. What did he say? Emily said. Her voice had gone very quiet. Sophia, what did he say? He said, fine. Fine. He said, fine. I'll get Emily back. She always takes me back. The line went silent. Somewhere in an airport, a woman was announcing a final boarding call. Somewhere in a house in Lincoln Square, a woman was standing at a window with her hand over her mouth and her eyes wide open and dry. He said it like a man checking a spare tire, Sophia said. Not angry, not sad, practical. He said it, and then he asked if he could use my bathroom. Emily started laughing. Emily, he asked if he could use your bathroom, Emily said. Yes. He asked to use your bathroom. Emily, are you all right? Sophia, Emily said, and something had changed in her voice. Something had gone from the register of grief into a register that was lower and steadier and much, much worse for the man who had said that sentence. You just gave me the last piece. What? For 4 months, Emily said, I've had one question, just one. Everything else I already knew. I knew about you in April. I knew about the hotel. I knew about the watch and the barber and the passcode. There was only one thing I didn't know. What? Whether he ever loved me at all, Emily said. Or whether I was infrastructure. Sophia didn't say anything. Because a man who has an affair is a man who fails, Emily said. That's terrible, but it's human. Men fail. Women fail. People are weak at 3 p.m. in a hotel on Michigan Avenue. And it's the worst thing in the world, but it's human. And I could have sat with that. I would have hated it, and I might have even survived it. But a man who blows up his marriage in front of 200 people gets rejected, and 40 minutes later says, fine, I'll get Emily back. She always takes me back. That's not a man who failed, Sophia said. No, Emily said. That's a man who was never there. That's a man who's been managing an asset for 10 years. Emily, I'm so sore, Sataen. Don't. Emily said it gently. Don't apologize to me. You didn't do this. You got lied to in a smaller way than I did. That's the only difference between us and you found out in a room full of strangers with a napkin in your hand. And I saw your face, Sophia. I saw your face, and I knew inside of 1 second that you weren't the villain. And do you know how I knew? How? Because you looked at me, Emily said. Villains don't look. Villains look at the floor. Sophia was crying so hard she couldn't speak. Get on your plane, Emily said. Go home, don't answer him. He's called 9 times. He'll call 20, Emily said. Then he'll stop for 4 days and call once more with something clever. That's the pattern. 4 days, then something clever. She paused. Sophia, one question, and then we never speak again, and I mean that kindly. Anything. Did he ever mention a folder? Silence. Long silence, long enough that Emily heard the gate announcement finish, and a child crying somewhere near a window, and a man asking somebody if this was the line for Group B. Sophia. Yes, Sophia said. Emily's hand tightened. He mentioned it in March, Sophia said. Once. He was drunk. He said, "She's got a folder," and I signed it, and I was too stupid to read it, and I've been paying for it for 9 years. What else? He said... Sophia stopped. Emily, I didn't understand it. I still don't. Say it anyway. He said, if she ever opens page 4, I lose everything, and the worst part is, I deserve it. Emily stood absolutely still in her own bedroom for 11 seconds. Thank you, she said. Emily, what is on page? Have a safe flight, Sophia. She hung up. He came at 4 in the afternoon. She saw him from the window, and she watched him do the thing he always did before a hard conversation. The thing she'd watched him do 100 times before board meetings, where he rolled his shoulders back twice and shot his cuffs and set his face, and she thought, he's prepping. He's prepping for me. He's prepping for me in the driveway of the house I paid the down payment on. He had flowers, white peonies and eucalyptus. The exact arrangement she'd picked for the anniversary from the exact shop, which meant he'd gone in and said whatever we ordered for the Anderson party, and some 22-year-old had smiled and made it for him. She let him knock 4 times before she opened the door. Emily? You look terrible. I haven't slept. He held the flowers up slightly then, when she didn't take them, brought them back down against his leg like a man holding a hat. Can I come in? No. Emily. You can stand there, she said. You've got as long as it takes me to lose interest. He absorbed that. She watched him absorb it, watched the recalculation happen behind his eyes, watched him drop the version of the speech he'd rehearsed in the car and reach for the second string one. I made the biggest mistake of my life, he said. Which part? What? Which part was the mistake? Emily said. 14 months or the microphone? All of it. That's not an answer, that's a settlement offer. His jaw moved. I'll do therapy. I'll do anything. I've already called somebody, a guy Greg knows he does. You called Greg? What? At some point last night or this morning, Emily said, in the worst 24 hours of your life you called Greg Mallory. Not your father, not your mother. Greg. She tilted her head. Why Greg Michael? He's my partner. He's your alibi. That's not... He sat at table 12 for 4 hours, knowing exactly what was coming, Emily said. He put a card in a box for our anniversary. His wife hugged me at the door. Karen Mallory hugged me at the door and said, 10 years, can you believe it? And Greg stood behind her looking at his shoes, and I thought he was just being Greg. She smiled with no warmth at all. You made your friends carry it. You made them all carry it. Do you know how many people at that party knew before I did, Emily? 6, she said. I've had 6 phone calls since 8 this morning. 6 people apologizing to me at 8 in the morning. Doug Mallory cried. A 58-year-old man cried on the phone to me about his own cowardice before I'd had coffee. Michael's face was gray. So no, Emily said. You didn't make one mistake. You built a machine. You had a whole staff. I never meant... Stop. She held up a hand. I want to ask you something. Real question. Not a trap. Okay. March 14th, Emily said. The 11 calls. Did you see them? He didn't answer. Michael, did you see them? Yes, he said. Something in her chest went very quiet. You saw 11 calls from your wife in 40 minutes, she said. And you did nothing. I thought it was about the caterer, he said, and he said it fast and desperate. And it was, Emily realized with a kind of awe, honest. It was the first honest thing he'd said in a year. You'd been calling about the caterer all week. I thought it was the caterer. So you'd have picked up, Emily said, if you'd known it was cancer. Emily, that's the standard, she said. That's the bar. You'd have picked up for cancer. You wanted a medal for that. That is not. Do you know what I did in that garage? She wasn't loud. That was the thing that undid him. She never got loud. I sat there for 40 minutes and I looked up the survival rates. And then I looked up what would happen to your company if I died. He stopped breathing. Because that's who I am, Emily said. That's what 10 years does. My name comes up on a screen with the word biopsy on it, and I open a second tab to check whether you'd be okay. Emily. And there it was, she said. Right there in the second tab. Everything I'd forgotten I knew. He went very still. Emily, he said. The box. There it is. That's not what this about, Michael. She leaned against the doorframe. You've been standing on my porch for 6 minutes. You've said I'm sorry twice, therapy once, and the box once. You want to know the ratio you should be worried about. I'm trying to save my marriage. You're trying to find out what I've read. That's not fair. You just said the box before you said her name, Emily said. You haven't said Sophia's name once. You've been here 6 minutes, and you haven't said the name of the woman you announced you loved 20 hours ago. His mouth opened, closed. She said no, didn't she? Emily said. And there it was, that flicker, that tiny administrative flicker at the corner of his eye, the one she'd spent 10 years reading across a kitchen table without knowing she was reading it. She called you, he said. She called me at 7 in the morning from a gate at O'Hare and told me the truth about her own worst night in the world, Emily said, which is more honesty than I got from you in 14 months. So yes, Michael, she called me, and I'm going to tell you the exact thing she told me, and I want you to listen because it's important. Emily, whatever she said, she's... Fine, I'll get Emily back. She always takes me back. The porch went silent. You said that... Emily said in her hallway 40 minutes after you set my life on fire, and then you asked if you could use her bathroom. That's out of context. What's the context? She spread her hands. Genuinely, I'm asking. Give me the context in which a man says, I'll get Emily back, she always takes me back. And it means something other than what it means. I was destroyed, Michael said. I was Emily. I had just blown up my entire life. I wasn't thinking. That's my point. What? You weren't thinking, Emily said. You weren't thinking, so the truth came out. That's what not thinking is. Not thinking is when the lid's off. And with the lid off in the worst hour of your life with nothing left to lose, the first thing that came out of you wasn't grief. It wasn't shame. It wasn't my name in a sentence with the word sorry. She looked at him. It was inventory. Emily, you checked the spare, she said. Your girlfriend said no, and you checked the spare, and the spare was me, and it's always been me. That's not a bad night, Michael. That's an org chart. I love you. She actually flinched. Not much, but he saw it, and he lunged for it. I do, he said, and he came half a step forward. Emily, I do. I've been sick about it for a year. Do you know what it's been like? Yes, Emily said. Yes, I do. Every day lying to you, every day, it was killing me. Yes, Emily said. I imagine it was very hard for you. And it came out so mild that it took him a second and a half to understand what had happened. That's not what You just told me your affair was painful, Emily said. To me, on my porch, 20 hours after. I'm trying to explain. Michael, I'm going to tell you something, and it's the last free thing you're ever getting from me, Emily said. You didn't confess because it was killing you. You confessed because it stopped killing you. Guilt is heavy. You didn't put it down. You handed it to me, in a ballroom, in front of my mother. And the second it left your hands, you felt so much lighter that you drove to Clark Street and bought flowers. Because for about 40 minutes last night, you were the happiest you've been in a year. That is a horrible thing to say. It's a horrible thing to have done. He stood there. And then because he had run out of everything else, Michael Anderson did the last thing in his bag, the thing that had worked on her at 29 and 33 and 36, the thing that had ended every fight they'd ever had. His face crumpled. You're the only person who ever believed in me, he said. And Emily Carter looked at him for a long moment. There it is, she said softly. Emily, Ainsley Avenue, she said. 4 a.m. You said that to me on the floor of an apartment with a bucket next to you because you'd been sick, and I made you eggs, and you put your head in my lap and you said, you're the only person who ever believed in me. She nodded slowly. And I've heard it 14 times since. I counted. I actually counted, Michael, because in May I started writing things down. Writing what down? You said it in 2017 when payroll bounced. You said it in 2019 when the second lease fell through. You said it at your father's bedside in a hospital, holding my hand while a nurse was standing there. You've said it every single time you needed something and had nothing to trade. Her voice never rose. It isn't a compliment, it's a card. You've been playing the same card for 10 years and I finally noticed it's the only one in your hand. He was crying now. Real tears. She was almost sure they were real, and that was somehow the saddest thing about the whole day. So here's what I know, Emily said. You're not scared of losing your wife. You've been losing your wife for 2 years and you slept fine. You're scared of losing the only person who's ever gotten you out. That's not love, Michael. That's a fire exit with a face on it. Please, he said. Emily, please. For 10 years I carried you, Emily said, and I thought I was being loved back and I wasn't. I was being used well. You were kind to me, the way you're kind to a bridge you drive over every day. Don't do this. And the worst part, she said, the part I'm going to be in therapy about for 3 years, is that I liked it. I liked being necessary. I liked it so much I built a whole life where the only way anybody needed me was if they were drowning. Emily, you'll never find someone who understands you like I do. She stopped. She looked at him, and he saw 1 second too late that he'd finally said the thing that couldn't be walked back. Say that again, Emily said. I didn't mean, no, say it again, slowly. Emily. You'll never find someone who understands me like you do, she said. That's what you just said. 20 hours after you told 200 people I was a placeholder, you're standing on my porch telling me I'd better take you back because nobody else will have me. His face had gone white. You never understood me, Emily said. Not one day. You understood what I'd tolerate. That's a different skill. That's a very valuable skill, actually, and you're excellent at it. You're the best I've ever seen. You've been running a live experiment on my limits for a decade, and you have never once been wrong about them. She smiled, and it was the most frightening thing he'd ever seen. Until last night. I'll fix it, he said. Emily, I'll fix it. Just tell me what you want. I want you to leave. Emily. And Michael. She was already closing the door. Tomorrow morning at 9 when the bank opens on Clark Street. Be there. He froze. What? 9 o'clock, she said. Wells Fargo on Clark. Second signature card. You're going to want to be in the room. Emily, wait. Bring Greg, she said. He's going to need to hear it too. And she shut the door on Michael Anderson and locked it, and stood with her back against it and did not cry. And on the other side of 2 inches of oak, a 39-year-old man stood on a porch, holding white peonies and eucalyptus, and said her name 11 times to a door that never answered. She was at the bank at 8:40. 20 minutes early because she had been early to everything for 10 years, and she wasn't going to become a different woman on a Tuesday. She sat in a molded plastic chair in a lobby that smelled like carpet cleaner, with a canvas tote bag on her knees, and her phone face down on top of it, and she watched the door. At 8:51, Greg Mallory came in. He was alone. He'd shaved badly. He saw her, and he stopped moving entirely, the way a man stops when he's spent 48 hours rehearsing a sentence, and it leaves him at the door. Greg. He's parking. Okay. Greg didn't sit. He stood 4 feet away with his hands hanging and said, Karen left. Emily looked up. Sunday night, Greg said. She packed a bag Sunday night. She asked me one question. She said, did you know before the toast or during? And I said before, and she said, how long before? And I said, his voice went. He got it back. I said, August. August, Emily said. Emily, I want you to... August of last year, Emily said. So 11 months. Yes. You hugged me at Thanksgiving. Yes. You sat in my kitchen in February and ate my food and told me about your daughter's applications. Yes. 11 months, Emily said. And the closest you ever got was what? Nothing. Not a text, not a look, nothing. I told him to tell you. Greg's face had gone red and wet all at once the way it does with men who never do this. I said it to him 20 times. I said, Mike, you tell her, or I will. And he'd say, you'll what, Greg? You'll what exactly? And he'd let it sit there because he knew. He knew what I... He stopped. Emily let the silence run. She let it run long enough to be cruel, and she was aware that she was doing it, and she did it anyway, and she thought, so this is who I am now. He knew what she said. You know what? Greg said quietly. I want to hear you say it in a bank lobby, Greg. He knew I signed too. There it was. Page 4, Emily said. Greg Mallory put a hand over his eyes, a 58-year-old man standing under fluorescent lights at 8:54 in the morning, and said, Emily, please, please, my daughter starts at Loyola in September. Greg, Emily said, look at me. He didn't. Greg, look at me. He looked. You've had 9 years to come to my house, she said. 9, not 11 months, 9 years. You could have knocked on my door any day since 2016 and said, Emily, I have to tell you something. And every single one of those days, you decided that Karen not knowing was worth more than me knowing. She stood up. So don't stand in a lobby and tell me about Loyola. My grandmother worked at a Woolworths for 31 years so that money existed. She's dead. She never met either one of you, and you spent her. The door opened at 8:57. Michael came in with his coat over his arm, and he saw them together, and something crossed his face, and Emily read it in real time, and it wasn't fear, it was irritation, and that told her more than anything else that morning. You two been talking, he said. Yes, Emily said. Great, that's great. He turned to Greg. You say anything stupid? And Greg Mallory, who had known Michael Anderson for 19 years, said, Yeah, Mike, I did. I told the truth. Michael's mouth thinned. Let's go, Emily said. The woman at the desk was named Priya. She was maybe 26, and she was very good at her job, and she had absolutely no idea what she was walking into, and Emily felt bad about that. Box 211, Emily said. Emily Carter. I'll just need ID and your key and... Priya glanced at the screen. There's a second signatory, Michael Anderson. He's right here. Great, I'll just need his... He doesn't have a key, Emily said. Michael said, I have a key. Emily turned and looked at him. I have a key, he said again. It's at the house. It's in the drawer in your office, Emily said. In the small dish with the cufflinks. Yes. It's been in that dish since March of 2016, Emily said. It's got dust in the teeth. I looked at it 3 days ago. Priya's eyes moved carefully from one of them to the other. He can come in with mine, Emily said, and smiled at her. And it was a real smile because none of this was Priya's fault. Thank you. I'm sorry. We're going to be strange today. They went into the room, and Priya set the box down and left, and the door clicked, and it was the three of them, and a metal box on a table. 9:04 in the morning. Emily, Michael said, before you... No. Just let me say one thing. You've had 9 years to say one thing. You never opened it, Michael said. In 9 years. You never opened it, and I need to understand why you're opening it now, because if this is Emily, if this is about hurting me, everything you're about to see, Emily said, you signed. She opened the box. There was a folder in it, just one. Brown, worn at the corners with a rubber band around it that had gone brittle and snapped when she touched it, and Emily looked at that snapped rubber band for a second longer than she needed to because she had put it on herself at a kitchen table in 2016 with her hands shaking, and now it was 2026, and her hands weren't shaking at all. She put the folder on the table. She didn't open it. Tell me what's in it, she said. Emily, you tell me out loud in front of Greg. This is... Michael's voice went up. This is a stunt. You want me to perform for you? Fine. Great. You've got the folder. You've got the moral high ground. You've got the whole... Michael. Emily put one finger on it. Page 1 is a promissory note. $220,000 dated March 11th, 2016. Page 2 is a security agreement. Page 3 is a conversion schedule. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to save yourself 30 seconds? The room got very quiet. 220, Greg said almost to himself. It was 220. It was $220,418, Emily said. The $18 is why I know you didn't plan it. Nobody plans a number like that. That's just what was in the account. Michael sat down. Say whose account? Emily said. Emily. Say whose account, Michael? You know whose account. Say it. Greg Mallory flinched. Michael did not. Michael looked up at his wife, and for one moment, one honest moment, he was 30 years old again in a room he couldn't get out of, and he said, "My father's." Emily nodded slowly. "Your father's retirement," she said. "The one he gave you power of attorney over in 2014 because his hands were bad and he trusted you, and he told everyone at church that his son was managing his money for him because his son was a businessman." "It was a bridge," Michael said. "It was 6 weeks. It was supposed to be 6 weeks. Say the rest." "The Ellison contract was signed." "Say the rest, Michael." "It wasn't signed," Greg said. Michael's head snapped around. "Greg, it wasn't signed." Greg's voice was thin and flat. "We told each other it was as good as signed. We told each other that for 11 days. Then we told the bank that. Then Mike told his father's account that." "Shut up, Greg." "Then Ellison went with Nordstrom," Greg said, "and the money was gone, and it was March, and Mike's dad had a physical scheduled in May, and the statements go to the house." I said, "Shut up." "And you came to my office," Greg said, and now he was looking at Michael and his eyes were streaming, and his voice was steady as a rail. "And you said, Greg, if my father opens that statement, he dies. Not figuratively. He dies. And I believed you, and I helped you cover it, and I have not slept a full night since." 9:11 in the morning. "Emily," Michael said. His voice had changed. It had gone soft and fast and pleading. "Emily, listen to me. Listen. You know why I did it. You know why. You were there." "I was there," Emily said. "He would have died." "He would have been humiliated," Emily said. "There's a difference, and you've spent 10 years pretending there isn't because he would have died. Lets you be a hero, and he would have been humiliated makes you a thief." "Emily, I was there," Emily repeated. "You came home on a Wednesday. You sat on the floor of the bathroom with your back against the tub, and you couldn't get a full sentence out for 20 minutes. And I sat on the tile with you, and I held your face in my hands, and you looked at me and said, 'I took my dad's money, and it's gone.'" Michael's jaw was shaking. "And do you know what I did?" Emily said. "In that moment, that exact moment. Do you remember what I said? You said you'd fix it." "No," Emily said. "I said okay." Greg made a small sound. "That's what I said," Emily said. "Not how could you, not you did what. I said okay, like a nurse, like somebody triaging a wound. I skipped straight past the part where I was allowed to be horrified because you were on the floor and you needed me, and God help me, that was the best I ever felt in my entire marriage." "Emily, that was my drug," Emily said, and her voice finally cracked once and she let it. "That was it. Right there on the bathroom tile. That was the hit I chased for the next 10 years. Nobody said anything. "So I called my grandmother's estate on Thursday," Emily said. "And on Friday I called Ruth Bergman, who was my mother's friend and a lawyer for 40 years, and Ruth said, 'Honey, don't.' She said it 3 times. She said, 'Emily, if you make this go away, he'll never have done it.' And I said, 'Ruth, I love him.' And Ruth said, 'That's not what I asked.'" Michael put his face in his hands. "So we compromised," Emily said. "Ruth wouldn't let me just hand it over. She said if I was going to do it, I was going to do it like an adult. So she drafted this, $220,418 from me personally to the company as a secured note. And on March 11th, 2016 at my kitchen table, you signed it." "I signed it," Michael said into his hands. "You didn't read it." "I didn't read it." "Say why." "Because I was—" He stopped. "Say why, Michael." "Because I'd have signed anything," he said. "Because you were saving me, and I was so grateful I couldn't see. Because I would have signed a confession to a murder that morning if you'd handed it to me and said, 'Sign here.'" "Yes," Emily said. "That's exactly right. And that's the thing you've never once been able to forgive me for." His head came up. "You've hated me since 2016, Emily said. "Not out loud, not on purpose, but that was the day. That was the day I stopped being your wife and started being the person who knows. And a man can love a woman who saw him at his worst for about 1.5 years. After that, every dinner she sits across from is an accusation, even when she's just passing the potatoes. That's not—" "You told Sophia I was cold," Emily said. You told her I stopped touching you in 2019. Michael, in 2019, you stopped letting me look at you. Stop. You started working late in 2019. I said stop. He was on his feet and the folder was between them, and Greg Mallory had gone perfectly still against the wall. Open it, Michael said. You want to do this, open it. Read page 4. Read it out loud, Emily, since we're doing performances now. Go ahead, say it in front of him. Emily looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, I've never read page 4. Michael's face went slack. What? I've never opened this folder, Emily said. Not once, not in 9 years. You're lying. Ruth Bergman drafted it. Ruth put it in a folder, Ruth put a rubber band on it, and I drove it to this bank on March 15th, 2016, and I put it in that box, and I never came back. She tapped the folder once. I know what's on page 1, 2, and 3, because I told Ruth what to write. Page 4 was hers. Page 4 was the part she said she'd add whether I liked it or not, and I said fine, and I have spent 9 years not looking at it. That's insane, Michael said. That's why would you? Because if I never read it, Emily said, then it wasn't a weapon. It was just paper, and I could tell myself I was a wife who helped her husband instead of a woman holding a leash. Greg Mallory said very quietly, O.M. And every year I didn't read it, Emily said. I got to be the person I wanted to be every year, 9 times. That was my birthday present to myself, Michael, not opening it. Michael was breathing hard. So how do you know? His voice was hoarse. Saturday, at the party, you said page 4. You said page 4 like you told Sophia about it in March, Emily said. Drunk. You said if she ever opens page 4, I lose everything, and the worst part is, I deserve it. The blood left his face in one pass. She told me that yesterday morning from an airport, Emily said. So on Saturday night when I said page 4 in that ballroom, I was guessing. She almost smiled. I've been running on a guess for 3 days. You went white in front of 200 people over a guess. Jesus, Greg said. So now I'm going to open it, Emily said. And I want to be very clear with both of you about what's happening, because this is the last honest room any of us are ever going to be in together. I don't know what's on this page. Greg knows. Michael knows. I don't. She put her hand flat on the folder. You've both had 9 years with this. I get 90 seconds. That's the whole marriage right there in one sentence. She opened it. 9:19 in the morning. Emily Carter read page 4 in a small room with a metal door, and neither man breathed, and when she got to the bottom, she went back to the top and read it again. Then she set it down, and she laughed. It was not a good laugh. It was the worst sound Greg Mallory had ever heard a person make, and he would think about it for years, standing in his kitchen at 3 in the morning, this laugh in a bank. Ruth, Emily said. Oh, Ruth. Emily, Michael said. Emily, whatever it says. It says, Emily said, that upon any material breach or upon the note going unpaid past March 11th, 2021, the principal converts to common equity at a valuation of $400,000. Greg closed his eyes. 400,000, Emily said. That's what the company was worth in 2016. That's what Ruth valued it at, and 220 of 400 is 55%. The room was completely silent. Say it, Greg, Emily said. 55%, Greg Mallory said. And what did we close last year at? Greg's mouth moved twice before anything came out. 19.1, he said. 19.1 million. So say the sentence. Emily, Greg, say the sentence. You own the company, Greg said. You've owned the company since March of 2021. Michael sat down very slowly, like a man lowering himself into water. 5 years, Emily said. I've owned it for 5 years. I've owned it through the Kellerman deal. I owned it in that hotel on Michigan Avenue. I owned it while I was writing Sophia Bennett's name in gold pen at my own kitchen table. She looked at Michael. You've been running my company. You've been having an affair on my payroll. You've been telling a woman in New York that you built it yourself. And every time you said, I built this, you were lying to her about property you don't own. Emily, Michael said. Emily, please. But that's not page 4, Emily said. Both men looked up. That's page 3, she said. That's the conversion schedule. I told Ruth to put that in. I knew about that. She picked up the sheet. Page 4 is what Ruth added on her own. Page 4 is what I've been afraid of for 9 years. What is it? Greg whispered. Emily read it out loud and her voice was perfectly steady. Acknowledgement of facts. The undersigned acknowledges that on or about February 28, 2016, he withdrew the sum of $220,418 from the retirement account of Frank J. Anderson held under a durable power of attorney without the knowledge or consent of the account holder and applied said funds to the obligations of the company. The undersigned acknowledges that this act constitutes financial exploitation of an elder under Illinois law. The undersigned further acknowledges that the lender's decision to restore said funds is made solely for the benefit of Frank J. Anderson and creates no forbearance waiver or release of any claim, civil or criminal, by any party, including the account holder himself. She put the page down. Signed Michael J. Anderson, she said. Witnessed Gregory Mallory. Greg Mallory slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor of a bank in a $2,000 suit. Ruth, Emily said again softly, and she was shaking her head, and there were tears on her face now, and she didn't seem to know it. That old woman, she knew. She knew I'd never use it against him, so she built it for someone else. Emily, Michael said. His voice was almost gone. Emily, listen to me. That's 9 years ago. There's a statute. There's a 5-year statute in Illinois for financial exploitation, Emily said, which Ruth would have known, which is why page 4 doesn't matter legally anymore, Michael. And if you think that's what I'm holding, then you have understood nothing about the last 10 years of your life. He stared at her. It doesn't matter that it's legal, Emily said. It matters that it's true, and it's on paper, with your signature. And there's exactly one person alive it was written for. And Michael Anderson understood. She watched it arrive. She watched it land in his face like weather. No, he said. Your father, Emily said, has been telling people at church for 4 years that his son saved his life. Emily, no. He stood up on Saturday night, Emily said. 73 years old, hands like that, and he stood up in front of 200 people and he said, I have never seen a coward look so proud of himself. And he was talking about his own son, and he still doesn't know the half of it. You can't. Michael was crying now, openly, without any of the technique. Emily, it'll kill him. It will actually kill him. You've met him. You know him better than I do. Yes, Emily said. I do. Then you can't. Michael. She folded the page in half once and put it in the tote bag on her shoulder. For 9 years, I made that decision for him. Every single day, I woke up and I decided that Frank Anderson didn't get to know what happened to his own money because I decided he couldn't handle it. I took his life and I made it smaller so it would fit in a shape I could carry. Her voice went. And you know what that is? That's the exact same thing you did to me. It's the identical thing. You decided what I could handle. For 14 months, you looked at me across a table and decided what I was strong enough to know. That's different. It's not remotely different, Emily said. It's the same crime, and I committed it against a man who stood up for me on the worst night of my life while his own hands were shaking. She picked up her bag. So no, Emily said. I'm not going to hurt your father, Michael. I'm going to stop protecting him. There's a difference, and you're going to spend the rest of your life learning it. Emily. He's owed a truth, she said. He's been owed it for 9 years. And I'm not going to be the 4th person in this room who decided he wasn't strong enough for his own life. Michael was on his feet. Emily, wait, what are you, when are you going to, and Emily? Carter looked at her watch, 9:26. He's in the lobby, she said. Michael's entire body went rigid. What? He called me last night, Emily said. At 11. He couldn't sleep, and he said, Sweetheart, on Saturday you said there was a folder. I've known my son for 39 years, and I want to know what's in the folder. And I said, Frank, are you sure? And he said, her voice broke finally all the way. He said, Emily, I'm 73. Everybody I love keeps deciding what I can survive. I'd like to find out for myself while I've still got time. No, Michael said. No. Diane drove him, Emily said. They'd been out there since 8:30. He wanted to be early. She got the door. He wore the suit, Michael. He wore the suit I picked out because he can't do the buttons. And she walked out of that room and left Michael Anderson standing over an open metal box with his business partner sitting on the floor behind him, and every step she took toward the lobby was the loudest sound in the world. And at 9:28 in the morning, an old man with shaking hands stood up out of a chair he shouldn't have been able to get out of, and held both arms open and said, "There she is." She didn't hug him right away. She stood in front of him with the tote bag on her shoulder and said, "Frank, I need to ask you one more time." "Ask." "You can still walk out of here," Emily said. "You can get in the car with Diane and go home and have your Tuesday, and nothing changes, and I will never bring this up again as long as I live. That offer's real. It expires in about 10 seconds, but it's real." Frank Anderson looked at her with those wet gray eyes and said, "Sweetheart, do you know what I did for 41 years? Tool and die. Tool and die." He nodded slowly. 41 years of holding still while something sharp came at me. I'm not scared of a piece of paper. I'm scared of being an old man in a room where everybody knows something except him. His hand came up and it was shaking, and he put it flat against her cheek. "That's the only thing I'm scared of. And you're the only one who's ever asked me first." Emily's chin went. "Okay," she said. "Okay." Diane Anderson stood up from the chair beside him, and she was already crying, and she said, "Emily, honey, is it bad?" "Yes," Emily said. Diane's face did something terrible. "Diane," Emily said, and took her hand, "I want you to hear me. Whatever happens in the next 20 minutes, you did not do this. You have to promise me you won't take a piece of it. Mothers take a piece of everything, and there isn't a piece for you here. He's my son." "I know. He was 6 pounds, Diane said, absolutely wrecked. "He was 6 pounds, and I did everything, Emily. I did everything they tell you." "I know you did," Emily said. "I've watched you for 10 years. Diane, you set his alarm clock until he was 26. You called his professors. You paid a parking ticket for him in 2009 and never told him it existed." She said it gently. "You loved him so much you never once let him find out what things cost. That's not a crime. That's just love with the brakes off." Diane sat back down like her legs had quit. 9:31. Michael came out of the vault room. He came out fast and he stopped 10 feet away, and Emily watched him do the calculation, watched him look at his mother crying, and his father standing, and Greg somewhere behind him on a floor, and watched him try to find the version of himself that walked into this. "Dad," he said. "Dad, don't. Whatever she's about to—" "Michael," Frank said. "Dad, please, she's angry. She's got every right to be angry, but this isn't—" "Michael." Frank didn't raise his voice. He'd never had to. "Was I a good father to you?" Michael stopped like he'd hit glass. "What?" "It's a simple question. Was I a good father?" "Dad, I don't know what you want me to." "Because I've been up all night doing arithmetic," Frank said, "and I keep landing on the same number, and the number is that I don't know one true thing about you. 39 years. And I sat down last night and I tried to think of one thing I know about my son that he told me himself. That turned out to be true when I checked it." He waited. "I got nothing. I got a golf score from 2011. "That's not fair." "So I'm asking," Frank said, "was I a good father? Because if I was, and this is what came out, then I have to understand what happened. And if I wasn't, then I'd like to know that too, while I've still got the parts to feel it with." Michael's mouth was open. "Say something true," Frank said. "Right now. Anything. One true thing out loud before she opens her bag. That's what I came for. I drove down here at 8 in the morning hoping my son would beat her to it, 9:33. And Michael Anderson stood in the lobby of a bank and said, 'Dad, she's got the company. That's what this is. She's taking the company.'" Emily closed her eyes. Frank Anderson's face didn't move for 4 full seconds. Then he said, "Okay." And something went out of him, and it was not dramatic. It was just an old man losing about an inch of height, and Emily thought it was the single saddest thing she had ever seen. "Emily," Frank said, "open the bag." "Dad, open the bag, sweetheart." She took out the page. "Frank," she said, "I'm not going to read it to you. You're not a child, and I'm not going to be one more person handling you." She gave it to him. He had to hold it with both hands because of the tremor, and he had to get his glasses out of his breast pocket, and Diane had to help him with them, and that took 11 seconds, and nobody in that lobby said a word for 11 seconds, while a 73-year-old man got his glasses on to read the worst sentence of his life. Emily made herself watch. "She thought you chose this. You don't get to look away from it," Frank read. She saw the exact line where it landed because his thumb moved, and he read it again, and then his shoulders came down and he said very quietly, "February." "Yes," Emily said. "February of 2016. "Yes." "I had my physical in May," Frank said. "I remember because Diane made me go. And in April," he stopped. He looked up over the top of his glasses at his son. "In April, I asked you about the statements. Do you remember that I said, 'Michael, I haven't seen a statement since Christmas,' and you said the firm went paperless?" Michael said nothing. "They went paperless," Frank said. "Dad." "I said, 'Well, can you print one out for me?' And you said, 'Sure,' and you never did. And I asked twice more, and then I stopped asking." He took the glasses off, "Because I didn't want to be the kind of father who didn't trust his son." "Frank," Emily said softly. "No, let me get through it." His voice was going, but he kept it. "I want to say this in front of everybody because I have been the biggest damn fool in the state of Illinois, and I'd like to do it out loud one time and then be done." He turned to Emily. 4 years ago, I stood up at Christmas dinner with a glass in my hand, and I thanked my son for saving my life. Do you remember what you did?" "Frank." "You got up," Frank said, "and you went in the kitchen and you did the dishes. For 40 minutes. There were 4 dishes. Emily's hand went over her mouth. "I thought you were being modest," Frank said. "I thought that's Emily. She can't take a compliment. 18 months ago, I got that piece of mail with your name on it, and I called the hospital, and a very nice woman told me the name on the payment, and I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours. His eyes were streaming now. "And I decided not to say anything. I made that decision, sweetheart. Me. Because I thought if I said it out loud, you'd have to admit it, and then my son would have to admit it. And I thought, God forgive me, I thought it was easier for everybody if I just knew it quietly." "Frank, you don't have to." "So I did the same thing you did," Frank said. "I sat on it for 1.5 years to keep the peace, and every single day I sat on it, he got a little braver." He looked at Michael. "I made you, not the money, the quiet. Every time I let something go, I built another inch of the man who could stand up at a party and do what you did to her." "Dad, stop it," Michael said, and his voice broke, and for the first time in 5 days it sounded real. "Stop it, that's not you didn't do anything." "No," Frank said. "That's exactly right. I didn't do anything. That's the whole confession. 938. Now," Frank said. He folded the page carefully in half. "I want to ask you a question, son, and I want you to be very careful because I'm not going to ask it twice." Michael's whole body was shaking. "When I was in that bed," Frank said, "in December of 2021, when the insurance said no the second time, do you remember what you told me?" Silence. "You held my hand," Frank said, "and you said, 'Dad, don't worry about the money. I've got it handled.' Dad." "I've got it handled," Frank said, "and I cried. I cried in front of a nurse because I was so proud of you I couldn't hold it." He held up the folded page. "And now I find out that what you had handled was that you'd already spent my retirement 5 years earlier, and your wife was quietly emptying a dead woman's savings account down the hall while you held my hand and took the credit." Diane made a sound that Emily would hear for years. "Was she in the building?" Frank said. "What?" "When you said, 'I've got it handled,' was Emily in the building? Was she in the building, Michael?" "She was in the cafeteria," Michael whispered. "She was in the cafeteria," Frank repeated, "on the phone, with a bank, while you held my hand." Michael's legs went. He didn't fall. He just leaned against the wall like the building had shifted. "You want to know the worst part," Frank said. "It isn't the money. I don't care about the money. I'm 73. I've got a house that's paid for and a wife who likes me. The money's nothing." He was crying openly now and not wiping it. "The worst part is that for 4 years you let me be proud. You let me walk into St. Cecilia's every Sunday and tell people my boy saved his old man. You let me be that. And every time I said it, you knew, and you let me say it again." "I was going to pay her back." "Emily," Frank said without turning. "Did he ever pay you back?" Frank that doesn't. Did he ever pay you back? No, Emily said. In 9 years? Frank said. Not a dollar? No. Did he ever ask? Emily was quiet. Emily, Frank said. Did my son ever once ask you what he owed you? No, Emily said. He never asked. 9:41, and Frank Anderson turned around and looked at his son and said the sentence that ended it. You know what that means, he said. It means he never thought of it as a debt. You only ask about debts. You don't ask about weather. Michael broke. It was not the ballroom performance. It was not the porch. It was a 39-year-old man sliding down a bank wall next to his business partner, both of them on the floor, and it was ugly and loud, and there was nothing in it that could be used for anything, and Emily stood there and felt the very last piece of it go. Because she'd waited 10 years to see him cry like that, and now that it was here, she felt nothing. Not triumph, not pity, just the flat, clean silence of a room where a machine has finally been switched off. Dad, Michael said. Dad, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. And Frank said, I know you are. Michael looked up. That's the thing nobody understands about you, Frank said. You're always sorry. You've been sorry your whole life. You were sorry at 9, you were sorry at 19, you'd cry so hard your mother'd have to lie down. He put his glasses back in his pocket. And it never once cost you anything. That's what she figured out. That's what took her 10 years and me 39. Your sorry is free. He turned to Emily. Sweetheart, I'd like to sit down now. Yeah, Emily said. Yeah, Frank. She got him into a chair. Diane got on one side of him, and Emily got on the other, and the three of them sat in the lobby of a Wells Fargo on Clark Street, while 2 grown men cried on the floor 20 feet away, and Priya, 26 years old, and very good at her job, stood behind a desk with absolutely no protocol for this, and quietly brought over 3 cups of water. Thank you, Emily said. I'm sorry about your morning. Ma'am, Priya said. Take your time. 9:52. Michael found her in the parking lot. Of course he did. Emily. She had her keys in her hand and she didn't turn around fast. She turned around the way you turn around when you've already decided what's about to happen. Michael, don't take the company. She actually smiled. There it is, she said. That's not... He wiped his face with the flat of his hand. That's not what Emily, I have 40 people. 40 families. That's not me being, Rose has been with me 8 years. Danny's wife just had the baby. That's not Michael. That's not a chess move. Those are real people, and if you walk in there and convert that note, the whole thing... Michael. What? You just spent 9 years telling yourself you stole from your father for his own good, Emily said. And now you're standing in a parking lot telling me not to take my own company for Rose's own good. Do you hear it? He stopped. You've never once done a single thing for yourself, Emily said. Not according to you. Every rotten thing you've ever done, you did it for somebody else's sake. You took Frank's money to save Frank's life. You lied to me to protect me. You confessed at a party to be honest. You want me to leave the company alone for Rosa. She shook her head slowly. You're the most generous man I've ever met, Michael. Everything you take on somebody else's behalf. That's cruel. It's a diagram, Emily said. I'm not being cruel. I'm showing you the shape. You've been running the same play since you were 9 years old, and your mother set your alarm clock. Find a person who loves you, put your problem in their hands, and cry until it's theirs. Emily, please, please, I'm begging you. I know. I have nothing, Michael said. Do you understand Sophia's gone? Greg's not going to you saw him. Greg's done. My father just... His voice went to pieces. My dad just said my sorry is free. In a bank. My dad said that to me in a bank. Yes, I have nothing left. You have exactly what you had in 2016, Emily said. You've got nothing and you're standing in front of me, and the last time this happened I sat down on the floor with you and said, okay. And it cost me 10 years and my grandmother's money and a Thursday afternoon in a parking garage looking up survival rates alone. That's not fair. Michael, she said it kindly. That was the worst part. You didn't come out here to save Rosa. You came out here because this is the part where I fix it. You've been waiting 5 days. The whole thing, the flowers, the therapy, the porch, you're the only one who ever believed in me. You've been running the sequence, and you got all the way to the end of it and I didn't do my part, and you don't have another sequence. There isn't one. This is the whole act." He stood there, and then very quietly he said the last true thing he would ever say to her. "I don't know how to be a person you don't rescue." Emily's eyes filled. "I know," she said. "I know you don't. And that's the saddest sentence anybody's ever said to me, and I believe every word of it, and Michael—" Her voice cracked. "It is not my job. It was never my job. I took it because nobody else applied." "Emily, you'll never find someone who understands you like I do," she said. He flinched. "That's what you said to me on the porch," Emily said, "and I've been carrying it around for 2 days, and I finally figured out why it hurt. It's because it's true. You won't. Nobody's ever going to understand you like I do, because nobody else is ever going to spend 10 years memorizing your worst hour and calling it love." "Then don't go." "That's not a reason to stay," Emily said. "That's a reason to run." 9:58. "I'm not taking the company," she said. Michael's head came up so fast it looked like it hurt. "What? I said I'm not taking the company." Emily unlocked her car. "I converted the note this morning. Ruth's daughter filed it at 9:15 while we were in that room. 55% effective retroactive to March 11th, 2021, and it's done and it's clean and there's nothing anybody can do about it." She opened the door. "And at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I'm signing all of it over." "To who?" His voice was almost nothing. "Emily." "To who?" 40% to the employees," Emily said. "It's an ESOP. Ruth's daughter's been working on it for 3 days. Rosa gets a piece. Danny gets a piece. 40 people based on tenure, and you can't touch it, and you can't undo it, and none of them will ever have to wonder if the man who signs their checks is having a good year." Michael was staring at her. "And 15%, Emily said, "in trust to Frank J. Anderson." The parking lot went silent. "Emily," Michael said. "Emily, no. $220,418 was taken out of that man's retirement," Emily said. "So it's going back in with 9 years of interest, and it's going back in from the thing it built, and every quarter for the rest of his life, your father is going to get a check with your company's name on it." She got in the car. "And he's going to know exactly where it came from, because he's a grown man. And nobody in this family is ever going to decide what he can handle again. You'd be left with nothing." "I'd be left with nothing," Emily agreed, and she laughed, and it was real. "Michael, do you hear yourself? Do you hear what you just said? That's the first thing you've thought about me in 5 days, and it's a balance sheet. That's not what I'm 41, Emily said. "I have a teaching certificate I've never used, and a savings account I'm going to rebuild, and a mother who's still alive, and a brother who wanted to punch a valet for me. That's not nothing. That's just not leverage." She put the key in. "You don't know the difference. You've never known the difference. That's actually the whole thing right there." Emily, wait." He had his hand on the door. "What am I supposed to do?" And Emily Carter looked up at him from the driver's seat of her own car and gave him the last gift she ever gave anybody who didn't deserve one. "Go inside," she said. "Your father's in a chair. He's 73 and he just found out. He's going to need help getting to the car because his hands are bad, and Diane can't do the door and the arm at the same time." Michael blinked. "Go help your dad to the car," Emily said. "Nobody's watching. There's no microphone. Nobody's going to be proud of you, and there's no room and you don't get anything for it." She pulled the door out of his hand. "Do that. Just once. Do one thing that doesn't pay." "Emily, that's it," she said. "That's the whole answer. That's everything I know." And she closed the door and started the car, and Michael Anderson stood in a parking lot on Clark Street and watched his wife's taillights, and behind him, through the glass, his mother was trying to get his father's arm around her shoulders and failing. At 10:04 in the morning, Emily's phone rang on the passenger seat. She glanced at it at a red light. "Frank." She pulled over. She answered on the second ring. "Frank." "Sweetheart." His voice was ruined. "Sweetheart, I have to tell you something, and then I'm going to hang up because Diane's got the car door." "Okay." "He's helping me," Frank said. "He's got my arm." Emily put her hand over her eyes. "He came inside and he didn't say anything," Frank said. "He just got under my arm. He's still got hold of me. He's crying so hard he can't see, and I don't know if it means anything, and I'm not going to lie to you and tell you it does, Frank." "But you did that," Frank said. "You did that from a parking lot after everything he did to you, and I want you to know that I saw it. And I'm going to remember it, and I'm the last person left who's going to tell the truth about this family, so it's going to get remembered right." Emily was crying. She didn't fight it. "One more thing," Frank said, "and then I'll let you go." "Yeah, you're not my daughter-in-law after today, I know that. I've known it since Saturday night." His voice broke wide open. "But I'd like to keep you anyway. Diane and I talked about it in the car this morning at 8:30, and we decided we'd ask, and if the answer's no, we'll never bring it up again, and we'll understand. But we'd like to ask." Emily sat in a car on Clark Street, with both hands on the wheel, and her whole chest coming apart. "Frank," she said, "take your time." "You stood up," she said, "in front of 200 people with your hands like that." "Well," Frank said, "somebody had to." She said yes at 10:11 in the morning in a car on Clark Street with mascara on the steering wheel. "Frank." "Yeah." "Yes." There was a long silence on the other end, and then a sound she'd never heard the old man make in 10 years, and then Diane's voice in the background saying, "Frank? Frank, what did she say?" And Frank Anderson saying wetly, "She said yes, Di. She said yes." And Diane starting to cry, and Emily sitting in a parked car with her hand over her mouth, listening to two people in their 70s fall apart in a Wells Fargo parking lot because a woman had agreed to keep taking their phone calls. "We're going to be a lot of work," Frank said. "I want you to know that going in, Di calls people. She'll call you about nothing. She called our mailman when he got shingles. Frank? And I don't do texts. I've tried. My thumbs are Frank. Yeah, sweetheart." "He's still holding your arm." Silence. "Yeah," Frank said. "He's still got me." "Okay," Emily said. "Okay, go home." She hung up. She sat there for 4 minutes. Then she wiped her face with a napkin from the glove box that had been in there since a drive-through in April, and she looked at herself in the mirror, and she said out loud to nobody, 2 o'clock. Ruth Bergman's daughter was named Nina Bergman Choi, and she was 52, and she had her mother's terrifying eyebrows, and she'd been on the phone since 7 a.m. "Sit," she said when Emily came in. "Don't talk. Drink that. It's tea. I don't care if you want it, hold it." "Nina." "Emily, I'm going to say a thing my mother would say, and then I'm going to do exactly what you asked me to do anyway, because you're a grown woman and it's your money." Emily held the tea. "Say it." "You are about to sign away $19 million worth of equity," Nina said, "at 41 years old with no job 3 days after your husband did what he did to you in front of your mother." She leaned forward. "And I have been a lawyer for 26 years, and I have watched a great many people make a great many decisions in a great many bad weeks. Say the rest." "The rest is that in 6 months you're going to be sitting in a rental with a heating bill," Nina said. "And you are going to think about today, and I need to know right now that you'll be able to look at it." "Nina, can I tell you what I did on Saturday night?" "I heard what you did on Saturday night. My mother's dead, and she heard about it." "No," Emily said. "Not the speech. After." Nina sat back. "I drove home," Emily said. "And I stood in my kitchen for about an hour, and then I opened the refrigerator, and there were 11 trays of leftover appetizers in there because I'd made Ben load the car. 11 trays. And I stood in front of that open refrigerator at 1 in the morning in a $500 dress, and I thought I have to do something with this. This is going to go bad." Nina didn't say anything. "My marriage exploded in front of 200 people 3 hours earlier," Emily said, "and my first coherent thought was that somebody had to deal with the food." She set the tea down. "That's what 10 years did to me, Nina. Somebody had to deal with the food. That's my whole personality. And I'm not asking you to admire me for giving the company away. I'm telling you I have to get it out of my hands, or I will spend the next 30 years dealing with the food." Nina Bergman Choi looked at her for a long moment. "My mother liked you," she said. "She told me about you. Do you know that? She told me about you in 2016, no names, but she told me. She came home and she said, 'I met a girl today who's about to make a mistake with her eyes open, and I couldn't stop her, so I wrote her a door.'" Emily's eyes stung. Page 4. Page 4, Nina said. She wrote it in an hour. I watched her do it at the kitchen table. She said, "This one's not for the girl. The girl'll never use it. This one's for whoever's left standing when she finally quits." "It was for Frank," Emily said. "She wrote it for Frank." "She wrote it for the truth," Nina said. "She just didn't know who'd be holding it." She pulled the folder across the desk. "All right, sign." Emily signed at 2:06 in the afternoon. 40% to 40 employees weighted by tenure irrevocable. 15% in trust to Frank J. Anderson, with quarterly distributions with Nina as trustee, with a clause that Emily made her put in, and Nina fought her on for 11 minutes and lost that Frank could not under any circumstances assign gift or transfer any portion of it to his son. "He'll try," Emily said. "In 2 years, in 4. Michael will get to him. Michael's very good, and Frank's 73, and he's got exactly 1 child." "So you're deciding what he can handle," Nina said. Emily stopped with the pen in her hand, and she sat with that for a long, long moment, and Nina Bergman Choi watched her sit with it and thought, there it is. That's why my mother liked her. "No," Emily said finally. "Take it out." "Emily, take it out, Nina. You're right. That's the same disease." She pushed the page back. "If Frank Anderson wants to hand his whole trust to his son on a Tuesday because he can't stand it anymore, then that's a 73-year-old man making a choice about his own money, and I don't get a vote. I've had enough votes in that family." Nina looked at her. "You're going to regret that." "Probably," Emily said. "But it'll be his regret. And that's the point of the whole thing." Nina crossed it out and initialed it, and Emily initialed it, and that was that. The remaining 0% went nowhere, because there wasn't any. "You know he owns 45 now," Nina said, walking her out. "Michael, he's still the largest single holder. He's still going to run the place." "For about 10 minutes, Emily said. "What?" "Nina, there are 40 employees who just found out that the man who signs their checks has been telling them for 9 years that he built it himself, and that actually his wife paid for it with her grandmother's money after he stole from his father." Emily got her coat. "You think Rose is going to keep making his coffee?" The vote was 8 days later. Emily wasn't there. She heard about it from Greg Mallory, who called her at 4 in the afternoon from a parking garage and sounded like a man who'd been awake for a week. Greg. They voted him out." Emily sat down on her own stairs. "How?" 40% plus me," Greg said. "I've got 12. I voted my 12. Emily closed her eyes. "Greg." "Rosa ran it," Greg said. "Rosa, she got everybody in a room. She'd made a spreadsheet. She'd been on the phone with Nina for a week. She stood up in the conference room and said, 'I have a question, and I want it answered in front of everybody whose money bought this building.' And he tried to talk. He tried the whole, the thing he does, the we're a family here. The we're a family here." Greg made a sound. "And Danny Ruiz stood up and said, 'Mike, my kid was born in April. You sent flowers. Whose money bought the flowers?'" Emily put her forehead on her knees. "What did he do?" she said. "He didn't fight," Greg said. "That's what got me. 19 years I've watched that man fight for a $9,000 invoice like it was his firstborn. He just stopped. He said, okay. He said, okay, and he asked if he could get his things, and Rosa said, 'Take your time, Michael,' and he said, 'Thank you,' and he took a box out to his car." "Greg." "He was in there 20 minutes, Greg said. "You know what? He took a picture, one picture, from the shelf behind his desk." Greg's voice went. "It's the one from Door County. It's you." Emily didn't say anything for a while. "Greg, why are you telling me that?" "Because I don't know what to do with it," Greg said. "Because it's been sitting in my chest for 6 hours like a stone, and I don't have anybody to give it to. Karen won't take my calls. My daughter won't." He stopped. I'm sorry, that's not your—" "It's not," Emily said gently. "It's really not." "I know." "Greg, I want to tell you something, and then I think we probably shouldn't talk anymore." "Yeah." "You voted your 12, Emily said. "That was 9 years late, and it cost you everything, and you did it anyway, and I'm not going to pretend that fixes it because it doesn't. But I want you to hear one true thing from me before we're done, because I don't think anybody's going to say it to you again." "Okay." "You were the last one out," Emily said. "Karen left. Michael's gone. Your daughter's not talking to you. And you're the only person in this entire thing who lost everything and got nothing. And you did it on purpose at 58 in a conference room when you could have just kept quiet for 8 more days and nobody would have known. She took a breath. That's not redemption. There isn't any. But it's the first thing you ever did that cost you, and I saw it. Greg Mallory cried into a phone in a parking garage. Go call your daughter, Emily said. Not to explain, don't explain. Just call and say you were wrong and hang up. Do it every week for a year. Don't ask her for anything. Don't cry at her. She stood up. That's how it works, Greg. It's boring and it takes years and nobody claps. That's the whole thing. That's all any of it is. Goodbye, Greg. She sold the house in October. Not because she had to. Because she walked into the kitchen one morning and stood in front of the refrigerator and realized that she knew without opening it exactly what was on every shelf, and that she had known that every day for 10 years, and that nobody else in the history of that house had ever once known what was in that refrigerator. She called Rachel. I'm selling it. Thank God, Rachel said. That was fast. Emily, I've been waiting 4 months to say that. Ben's had a realtor's number in his phone since July. We had a whole plan. There was a sequence. We were going to bring it up at Thanksgiving with your mother as backup. Emily started laughing. You had a plan. We had a deck, Rachel said. Ben made a deck. Ben made a deck about my house. Ben made a deck about your house, Rachel said, because Ben is a 50-year-old man who does not know how to say, I love you and I'm scared for you. So he made a deck. There's a slide about closet space. And Emily Carter sat down on the floor of her own kitchen and laughed until she couldn't breathe. And then she stopped laughing, and Rachel stayed on the phone, and neither of them said anything for 4 minutes, which is a very long time to say nothing on a telephone, and it was, Emily thought later, the single kindest 4 minutes of her life. She moved into a 2-bedroom in Ravenswood with a radiator that banged. She hated it for 6 weeks. Then one night in November, she woke up at 2 a.m. to the banging, and she lay there in the dark, and she waited for the feeling, the old feeling, the one where her hand went across the bed to check. And it didn't come. She lay there in the dark and did an inventory, and it went like this. Nobody in this apartment is lying to me. Nobody in this apartment needs me to fix something before breakfast. Nobody in this apartment is going to come home at 9 and say the traffic was bad. And Emily Carter, 41 years old in a rental with a bad radiator, started laughing at 2 a.m. and couldn't stop, and it went on so long that the woman upstairs banged on the floor and Emily said, sorry to the ceiling, and kept laughing. She went back to the community center in January. It had been 11 years. The building was the same and everything else was different. And the woman running the art program was named Yvonne Price, and she was 66 years old and had been there for 31 of them, and she took one look at Emily and said, you're the one who did the ceramics. That was 2015. Honey, I've got a memory like a tax auditor, Yvonne said. You did the ceramics, and then you stopped, and I always wondered why. Nobody stops in the middle of a kiln cycle. Emily opened her mouth to say something about being busy, and then she didn't. My husband's business was failing, she said, so I got a second job. Yvonne Price looked at her for a beat. And now I don't have a husband, a business, or a second job, Emily said. And Yvonne Price threw her head back and laughed so loud that 2 kids came in from the hallway to see what happened, and she said, well, get in here then, wash your hands. Table 3's a disaster and I'm not doing it. That was Tuesday. By March, she was there 4 days a week running the Wednesday and Thursday sessions, and the pay was so bad it was almost a joke and she'd stopped noticing. His name was Daniel Williams, and he was a pediatrician, and he'd been volunteering there on Thursdays for 6 years, and Emily didn't notice him for 2 months. That was the thing she'd think about later. She didn't notice him. He didn't do anything to be noticed. He came in at 4, and he sat down at the table with whatever kid was having the worst week, and he stayed for 2 hours and he left, and he never once told anyone he was a doctor. She found out in April by accident because a kid named Marcus cut his hand on a broken tile, and Daniel had the bleeding stopped and the kid laughing in about 40 seconds. And Emily said, "Where'd you learn that?" And Daniel said, "Med school mostly." "You're a doctor." "I'm a pediatrician." "You've been coming here for 6 years and you never said that." Daniel Williams shrugged and said, "Nobody asked," and went back to gluing a tile, and something in Emily's chest went very quiet and very still. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why would you not say it? People say it. People say it at parties. People work it into the first 10 minutes. Daniel thought about it. That was the other thing. He actually thought about it for 4 or 5 seconds, which nobody ever did. Because they'd be nicer to me, he said, and I'd like it, and then I'd start needing it. He pressed the tile down. I had a father who needed it. Emily sat down across from him. That's the most honest thing anybody said to me in about a year, she said. I'm not always like this, Daniel said. I'm mostly boring. I have a very small life. I have a dog with a bad hip, and I make the same 4 dinners. What are the 4 dinners? And Daniel Williams looked up surprised, and Emily watched a 48-year-old man realize that somebody had asked him a follow-up question, and she thought, oh no. They didn't go out for 4 more months. He didn't ask. That was the thing that undid her. He didn't ask in April, he didn't ask in May, and by June she'd realized he wasn't going to ask, and it drove her out of her mind. And in July she finally said, Daniel, are you not asking me out on purpose? He put down the glue. Yes, he said. Why? Because you got divorced in February. Emily blinked. How do you know when I got divorced? Yvonne, Daniel said. Yvonne. Yvonne told me in about 9 seconds, Emily, she's Yvonne. So you've known since February, Daniel said. He looked up. And I decided in February that if I asked you in March or April or May, then somewhere in the back of your head forever, there'd be a little voice that said, he showed up when I was broken. And you'd never be able to prove it wasn't that, not to yourself. He shrugged. I didn't want to be the rebound, not because of my pride, because you'd have to live in it. Emily stared at him. That's insane, she said. Probably. That's Daniel. That's 4 months of your life. I'm 48, Daniel said. I've got some to spare. You waited 4 months so that I'd know I picked you. Yeah, Daniel said, and went back to the glue, and Emily Carter had to go stand in the supply closet for 2 full minutes. She came out and said, Thursday. What? Thursday, Emily said. You're not asking, I'm asking Thursday. And Daniel Williams smiled for the first time in a way she'd ever actually seen and said, Okay, but I want to say something first, and it's going to sound strange. Everything you say sounds strange. If it's bad, he said, if we go and it's bad or it's fine or it's nothing, I'd like to still come on Thursdays. This place matters to me. It mattered before you. He said it plainly, with no edge in it at all. So can we agree on that first? I don't want a good dinner to cost me 6 years. And Emily sat down. Because in 10 years of marriage, no one had ever once told her in advance what they'd need to keep, and then asked if that was all right. Yeah, she said. Her voice wasn't steady. Yeah, Daniel, we can agree on that. Michael called in September. She was in the car. She saw the name and she pulled over out of habit, and then sat there for a second, realizing she'd pulled over, which annoyed her, which was progress. She let it ring twice. Then she answered. Michael, you picked up. I did. I've called you 11 times since February, he said. I know. Why now? And Emily said, because I don't feel anything. And the honest astonishment in her own voice startled them both. Silence. That's the cruelest thing you've ever said to me, Michael said. It's not cruel, Emily said. It's a weather report. Emily. Michael, what do you want? Real question. I've got about 6 minutes. She heard him breathe. I'm working, he said. I wanted you to know that. I've got a job. It's a firm in Schaumburg. I'm doing ops. It's a title I would have laughed at 4 years ago. That's good. Don't do that. Do what? That thing where you sound like a guidance counselor, Michael said, and it cracked out of him raw. And Emily thought, there he is. Okay, she said, then say the real thing. And say, I've been in therapy, Michael said. 14 months, twice a week. And I want to tell you something my guy said because I've been sitting with it for 6 weeks and I can't put it down, and you're the only person alive who'd understand it. Michael, please. Emily closed her eyes. Go. He asked me to describe the happiest I've ever been, Michael said. And I couldn't. 40 years old. I sat in a chair for a full minute and I couldn't come up with one. And he said, okay, describe the safest you've ever been. His voice went, and it came out instantly. Instantly, Emily. Bathroom floor, 2016, back against the tub. Emily's hand tightened on the wheel. "The worst day of my life," Michael said. "That's my safe. That's what came out." And he said, "What was happening?" And I said, "My wife was holding my face." Neither of them said anything. And he said, "What did you have to do to get that?" And I said, "Nothing. I didn't have to do anything. She just—" He stopped. He was crying. And he said, "No, you had to be destroyed. That's the price. You could only be held if you were destroyed." Emily was crying too silently in a parked car, and she was so angry about it that she almost laughed. "So I've been going back through it," Michael said. "All of it. Every time I ever felt loved. And it's always the same. It's always the floor. Emily, I don't think I ever cheated on you for Sophia. I think—" His voice failed. "I think I was trying to get back on the floor. Michael, I burned my whole life down to get you to hold my face again." Emily sat there, and here's what she noticed and what she would tell Daniel that night and her therapist that Friday and Rachel about 10 times over the next year. She noticed that it was probably true. She noticed that it was the most self-aware sentence Michael Anderson had ever produced in his life, and she noticed that her hand had not moved toward the door. "That's a very good insight," Emily said. "Hey, Emily." "No, I mean it. That's real. Your guy's earning it. That's the actual truth about you, and it took you 40 years to find it. And I'm not being sarcastic. I'm not—" She wiped her face. "Michael, I want to be very careful here, because this is the last conversation we're ever going to have, and I want to get it right." "Don't say that." "You just handed me the floor," Emily said. Silence. "What? You just did it again," Emily said. "You just told me the most devastating thing about yourself in the most naked possible way. At the exact moment you had nothing else left to a woman in a car who hasn't spoken to you in 7 months. Why? Why me? You've got a therapist. You've got a mother who'd crawl over glass for you. Why did you need me to know?" He didn't answer. "Because I'm the only one it works on," Emily said gently. "Because the insight isn't the point. The insight's the new flowers. That's not fair. Michael, it's not even a criticism." She was crying, and her voice was steady, and she didn't know how both were happening. "You're doing it out of your bones. You're not scheming. I know you're not. You just found out you're a man who can only be loved on a bathroom floor, and so the first thing you did was call me and get on the floor. That's not a lie. That's the most honest thing you've ever done. It's just also the exact thing you've always done." The line was quiet for a long time. "So there's nothing," Michael said. "There's nothing I can ever do." "There's a great deal you can do," Emily said. "It's just none of it is to me." "Emily, you want to know what would have saved us," she said. "Do you actually want to know? Because I've had 18 months and a very expensive Wednesday appointment to think about it, and I know the answer. Yes." "One Tuesday in 2017, Emily said, you should have come home and said, 'I'm fine.'" Silence. "What?" "That's it," Emily said. "That's the whole thing. One ordinary Tuesday, nothing wrong, no crisis, no floor, and you walk in and I say, 'How was your day?' And you say, 'It was fine. Nothing happened. I don't need anything. How was yours?'" Her voice broke. "And then you listen to the answer, Michael, for 9 minutes, about nothing, about a woman at the co-op who was rude about a melon." That's it," Emily said. "That's marriage. It's not the bathroom floor. It's not the ballroom. It's not the grand confession or the grand rescue. It's a man saying, 'Nothing happened today,' and a woman saying, 'Tell me anyway.'" She was sobbing now, and she let it happen. "You never gave me one of those. 10 years. I don't have a single ordinary Tuesday. I have crises, Michael. That's my whole marriage. I have a highlight reel of catastrophes and not one single Tuesday." She heard him break. "I don't know how to do that," he said. "I know. I don't know how, Emily. I don't know how to walk in a room and not need something." "Then learn," Emily said. "You're 40. My father-in-law learned to ask for help at 73 in a bank lobby. You've got 30 years on him. He's not your father-in-law anymore." And Emily said, "Yes, he is." The silence on the other end had a whole world in it. "He calls me on Sundays," Emily said. "Your mother calls me about nothing. She called me last week because a raccoon got in the garage. I drove out there, Michael. I drove out to Berwyn on a Thursday about a raccoon. He never asks me to come. Michael said, and it came out of him like something torn. Michael. He never asks. 18 months. I go every week and he's glad to see me, and he never once asks. Have you asked him? Emily said. Nothing. Have you ever one time called your father and said, Dad, can I come over Sunday? I've got nothing to tell you and nothing to ask for, and I'd just like to sit in your kitchen. Nothing. That's the Tuesday, Emily said. That's the same Tuesday. It's the only test there is, and it's the same one every time, and you keep failing it in a different room. Emily, please. He's 75 in March, Emily said. He's got a tremor and a bad valve, and he is not going to be there forever, and you have somewhere between 5 and 15 years to figure out how to walk into a kitchen and want nothing. That's the work. That's the entire remaining work of your life, and there's no room and no microphone and nobody's going to clap, and if you do it right, nobody will ever know it happened except one old man who won't say anything about it because he's from Cicero. Michael was crying so hard she couldn't make out words. I have to go, Emily said. Emily, wait. One thing, and then I'll never want one. Are you happy? And Emily Carter sat in a parked car on Lawrence Avenue and thought about it. Really thought. 4 seconds, 5. Yeah, she said, surprised. Yeah, I am. With him, that's 2 things. Emily. Michael. She said it kindly, and she meant it, and that was the strangest part of all. The answer's yes, but not the way you're asking. You're asking if he makes me happy. He doesn't. That's not a job I'd give anybody again. Then what? He's boring, Emily said. He makes 4 dinners. He has a dog with a bad hip. He's never once made a speech at me. He told me in advance what he'd need to keep, and then he asked if that was all right, and Michael, I sat down. I had to physically sit down, because in 10 years nobody ever asked me if it was all right. Her voice went soft. He doesn't make me happy. He just doesn't cost anything. And it turns out I'm happy when nothing's costing me anything. Who knew? That sounds like nothing, Michael said. Emily, that sounds like a life where nothing happens. And Emily laughed out loud. Michael, she said, that's the most honest thing you've ever said. And that right there is the whole difference between us. That's it. That's the entire 10 years in one sentence. She hung up. He didn't call again. He kept his word about that, and it was in the end the only promise Michael Anderson ever kept to her, and she thought about that sometimes with something almost like tenderness. Sophia Bennett sent one email in December 18 months after. It was 4 lines. Emily, I'm not asking for anything and you don't have to answer. I got engaged in October. He's nothing like him. He's a man who returns library books. I wanted you to know that I asked for proof this time. I asked for proof on the 3rd date, and he laughed and showed me and said, Who hurt you? And I said, A man in a ballroom. And he said, Then I'll show you every time you ask. I don't know if that means anything to you. It means everything to me. Emily read it 4 times. Then she wrote back 2 lines. Sophia, nothing that happened in that room was your fault, and it took me a year to be able to write that sentence and mean it, and I mean it. Congratulations. Ask for proof. E. She never heard from her again, and that was right, and it was fine. Frank Anderson turned 75 in March. They did it in the Berwyn kitchen because Diane wouldn't hear of a restaurant, and there were 9 people there, and Emily brought a cake from Petrosi's. Rachel noticed it first. She said in the hallway. Petrosi's. Yeah. Emily. I know. You haven't been able to say that word out loud in 2 years. I know, Emily said. I called them on Monday. I got the same woman. She said Anderson party. And I said, no, actually Carter. And she said, oh, we've got you in the system, honey. And I said, well, take me out. She looked at Rachel. And then I ordered a cake. Rachel put her hand over her mouth. You ordered a cake. I ordered a cake, Emily said, from the bakery that made the cake that 140 people ate off paper plates in a ballroom after my husband told everybody I was a placeholder. She shrugged. It's a good bakery, Rachel. Why should he get the bakery? And Rachel Feldman, 41 years old, put her forehead on Emily's shoulder in an old man's hallway in Berwyn and said, God, I missed you. I've been here. No, Rachel said. You've been available. That's different. You've been available for 22 years. She lifted her head and her eyes were wet and furious. I missed you. Michael came at 4. Nobody had told Emily he'd been invited. Frank had obviously, because Frank had spent 2 years refusing to run a family where anybody had to be managed. And Emily had gotten exactly what she'd asked for, and it turned out that what she'd asked for meant her ex-husband walked into a kitchen while she was holding a cake. The room went dead. 9 people. Total silence. Diane's hand went to her mouth, and Michael Anderson stood in the doorway of his parents' kitchen with nothing in his hands. No flowers, no box, no card. Emily looked at his hands, and something moved in her chest that she couldn't name. "Dad," Michael said, "I'm not staying. I didn't know she'd be—" "I invited you both," Frank said. "I'm 75. I'm done doing that thing where I keep everybody in separate rooms." Michael looked at the floor. "Okay," he said. And then he looked up at Emily. And Emily braced, because she'd braced for 2 years, because there was always a sequence, there was always a play. "Emily," Michael said. "Hi. Hi. You look good. Thanks." And then he turned to his father and said, "Dad, I brought nothing. I want you to know that on purpose. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I almost brought a—" He stopped. He laughed, and it was terrible and small and real. "I almost brought a watch. I almost bought you a watch. Dad and I stood in the store and I thought, this is for me." Nobody breathed. "So I brought nothing," Michael said, "and I don't need anything, and I don't have anything to tell you. I just wondered if I could sit in your kitchen." Frank Anderson's face came apart, and Emily Carter stood there holding a cake from Petrossi's and understood that she had given him that sentence in a parked car on Lawrence Avenue 2 years ago, and that he had gone away and worked on it for 2 years like a man learning a language, and that it had cost him more than the ballroom ever had. "Sit down, Michael," Frank said. He sat down. And that was it. That was the whole thing. He sat in a chair at the end of the table for 2 hours, and he didn't perform, and he didn't cry, and he didn't tell one story about himself. And when Diane asked him about work, he said, "It's fine, it's boring," and moved on. And Emily watched a 58-second stretch where he asked his mother about the raccoon, and then actually listened to the answer. All of it. The whole tedious thing. The trap and the guy from the village and the hole in the soffit. Rachel found her on the back steps at 6. "Are you okay?" "Yeah. M." "Rachel, I'm okay." She was crying a little. Do you know how long I waited for that? Do you know what I'd have given for that one Tuesday? One ordinary Tuesday where he didn't need anything. And now he can do it. And now he can do it, Emily said. For his dad. For his dad? Rachel sat down. "Does that make you want him back?" she asked. Very carefully, the way you'd ask about a wound. And Emily Carter thought about it honestly all the way down for the last time in her life. "No," she said. No. Listen." She wiped her face. 2 years ago, that would have destroyed me. 2 years ago, if he'd walked in there and done that, I'd have gotten in the car and cried for a week, and I'd have thought, why couldn't he do it for me? Why did it take losing me? What was wrong with me that I wasn't enough to make him grow up? And now I know the answer," Emily said. "Nothing was wrong with me. That's it. That's the whole answer, and it's so boring, and it took me 2 years and $30,000. She laughed, and it came out wet. "He couldn't do it for me because I was there, because I was always there. He never had to learn it, because every single time he failed, I caught it before it hit the ground. Rachel, I was the reason he never had to grow up, not the victim of it. The reason." Rachel didn't say anything. "That's what I couldn't face for 10 years, Emily said. "Everybody wants to tell me I was a saint, and he was a monster, and it's so much simpler than that. I found a man who couldn't stand up, and I held him up, and then I got angry that he couldn't stand." She shook her head. "The day I left, he started learning. It took 18 months, and a bank lobby, and losing everything he had. And that's not tragic. That's just what it costs. It was always going to cost that. The only thing my 10 years bought was the delay. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard." "It's not," Emily said. "That's the thing. It's really not." She looked out at Frank Anderson's yard. "Because I got to find out what I was doing. Rachel, I'm 43, and I found out what I do. I find drowning people, and I hold them up, and I call it love, and I feel holy while I do it." She turned. I've been doing it since I was 9. I did it to my mother. I did it to you in college." "You did," Rachel said quietly. "I know." "Emily, you did, in 1997. I'm not going to pretend you didn't." "I know," Emily said, "and I'm sorry." "I loved it," Rachel said. "That's the part nobody says. I loved it. It was the best thing that ever happened to me, and it took me 20 years to notice that you'd never once let me do anything for you." They sat there. "Last Thursday," Emily said, "the car wouldn't start." "What?" "In the lot at the center, battery. And I stood there with the hood up, and I got out my phone, and I had my hand on AAA. She was smiling and crying, and it was ridiculous. And I put it down, and I walked back in the building, and I found Daniel, and I said, 'My car won't start, and I don't know what to do.'" Rachel started crying. "Rachel," I said it out loud, to a man, "I don't know what to do." Emily pressed both hands to her face. "Do you know I've never said that 43 years? I have never said that sentence to another human being in my entire life." "What did he say?" "He said, 'Okay,'" Emily said, and Rachel Feldman made a sound and grabbed her hand. "He said, 'Okay,' and he got his cables and he did it, and it took him 9 minutes, and it didn't work the first time, and he swore, and then it worked, and he said, 'You should get that tested,' and I said, 'Okay,' and we went and got a sandwich." Emily was laughing and sobbing at once. "That's it. That's the whole story. There's no Rachel. There's no event. Nothing happened. It's the biggest day of my life, and there's nothing in it." "Emily." "It was a Tuesday," Emily said. Michael came out at 6:40 to say goodbye. He stood on the bottom step with his keys in his hand. "I'm heading out." "Okay." "Emily." He stopped. He looked at the ground and then deliberately made himself look up. "I want to say something, and I want you to know I'm not asking for anything back. I've been practicing. My guy made me practice it because he said I'd try to make it a transaction, and he's right, I would." "Okay." "Thank you for my father," Michael said. Emily's throat closed. "That's it," he said. "That's all of it. I get a father because you did something on a Tuesday in a bank when you had every reason not to, and you didn't have to, and nobody made you and nobody was watching, and I get to sit in his kitchen because of it. I would not have him without you. I'd have a man who died proud of a son who didn't exist." His voice broke once, and he let it, and then he got it back, and Emily saw the work in that 2 years of it. "So, thank you, that's it. You don't have to say anything." And he turned around and walked to his car. He didn't look back. He didn't linger at the door. He didn't wait for her to say it back. And that, in the end, was the only real gift Michael Anderson ever gave her, and it took him 2 years and everything he owned to be able to afford it. Frank died on a Sunday in the fall 4 years later at 79 in his own kitchen with a cup of coffee in front of him, which is exactly what he'd have picked. Emily got the call at 7:40 in the morning. It was Michael. "Emily?" She knew from the shape of the sound. "Michael!" An hour ago. He was crying. He wasn't performing. She could tell the difference now instantly, effortlessly, the way you can tell your own name. "Mom's okay. She's Rachel. Sorry, Diane's okay. She's in the other room. She's calling people." "I'm coming." "Emily, wait. Wait. I have to tell you something first, and I have to do it now, because I won't be able to later." She stopped with her keys in her hand. "He was fine," Michael said. "It was fast. He was drinking coffee, and he said something, and then he was gone." "What did he say?" And Michael Anderson said, he said, "Call Emily first." Emily sat down on the floor of her own apartment. "He wasn't, Emily. He didn't know it was happening. That wasn't a last words thing. It was a Sunday. He always called you on Sunday." Michael was in pieces. "He just said, 'Die at 7. Call Emily first.' And he reached for the..." "Michael." "He wanted you first," Michael said. "For 4 years he wanted you first. And I was so jealous of you for so long that I couldn't see what it was. And I finally, Emily, I finally get it. I finally get it." "What?" she whispered. "He didn't love you more than me," Michael said. "He just knew you'd pick up." Emily Carter put her hand over her mouth and made a sound in an empty apartment at 7:40 on a Sunday morning. "Come on," Michael said. "Come now. Mom needs you. And Emily." He stopped. "Come as family, not as help. Don't come in and start doing the dishes. She doesn't need you to do the dishes. She needs you to sit in a chair and be somebody who loved him. Do you understand what I'm asking?" And Emily Carter closed her eyes, because there it was, 9 years too late from the man who couldn't do it on the worst morning of his life with nothing in it for him. "Yeah," she said, "I understand." She spoke at the funeral. Diane asked her to, and Michael didn't fight it, and there were 300 people there because Frank Anderson had been going to the same church for 51 years and had never once told a soul what his family had done to him, not because he was protecting them, but because he thought it was nobody's damn business. Emily stood up in front of 300 people in a room with a microphone. She was aware of the symmetry. So was everybody else. She saw Rachel's face in the third row, and Ben's, and her mother's, and Daniel's at the end of the row with his hands folded, and Michael in the front with his mother's hand in both of his, and she stood there for a second and let all of it move through her. "I met Frank Anderson when I was 31, she said, "and he shook my hand and he said, 'You're the girl, not you're Michael's girl.'" "You're the girl." She looked out. "I've thought about that for 12 years. And it took me most of them to understand that it wasn't a slip. That's who he was. He never once in 12 years described me as belonging to somebody." Somebody in the back made a noise. "Frank worked 41 years in tool and die," Emily said. "He told me one time that the whole job was holding still while something sharp came at you. And I laughed. And then 4 years ago I watched him do it." Her voice didn't shake. "I watched a 73-year-old man find out the worst thing about his own son in a bank lobby at 9 in the morning because he'd asked to know. Because he'd said, 'Everybody I love keeps deciding what I can survive, and I'd like to find out for myself while I've still got time.'" 300 people were absolutely silent. "He got up that morning and he put on a suit and he drove down there to find out something that broke his heart," Emily said. "And he was early. He wanted to be early." She let that sit. "That's the whole man. That's everything I've got to tell you about him. He was early to the worst morning of his life because he'd rather know." She looked at Michael. Michael was looking back at her, and he was destroyed, and he was still. "He never once told me what I could handle," Emily said. "Not one time in 12 years. He's the only person who ever loved me who didn't." Her voice finally went. "And I want to say something to the people in this room who are 65, 70, 75, and who've got a family that talks around you and over you and decides things in the hallway for your own good. Frank Anderson wouldn't have it. At 73 with hands that couldn't do a button. He made everybody in his family stand in one room and say it out loud." She wiped her face. "Make them. You're not fragile. You're just outnumbered." She sat down. Michael reached over without looking at her and squeezed her hand once and let go, and that was the last time they ever touched. She married Daniel Williams 11 months later. 22 people in Yvonne Price's backyard on a Saturday. Yvonne made the food and refused all help and told Emily to sit down 4 separate times, and the 4th time she said, "Emily Carter, if you get up one more time, I'm going to put you in the car." And Emily sat. There was no toast. That was Daniel's idea, and it was the last thing anybody expected, and it was the only wedding gift she'd ever wanted in her life. "No speeches," he said. "None. Not me, not Ben, not Rachel, not anybody. Nobody stands up, nobody gets a microphone." "Daniel, Emily." He took her hands. "You've heard enough of what people can say in front of a room. You've had a lifetime of it. I've got nothing to tell 22 people about you that you don't already know, and if I ever do have something to say, I'd like to just say it to you on a Tuesday in a kitchen where it's cheap." Emily Carter put her face in her hands. "You're going to be very hard to leave," she said. "That's the idea," Daniel said. She was 48 when the community center made her director. It paid less than Michael's company had paid its receptionist. She had a dog with a bad hip, and a husband who made 4 dinners, and a mother-in-law who wasn't her mother-in-law, who called her every single week about nothing until she died at 86, and Emily drove out to Berwyn for 11 years about raccoons. She never got the money back, not a dollar of the $220,418. Nina Bergman Choi asked her about it once, years later over lunch, and Emily thought about it and said, "Nina, my grandmother worked at a Woolworth's for 31 years. "I know. She died with $220,000 and she never told anybody she had it," Emily said. "Not one person. She just sat on it. 31 years of standing up in a saved account doing nothing." She put down her fork. "And I spent it saving a man who couldn't stand up. which was wrong. It was the wrong thing to do with it, and I knew it when I did it, and Ruth told me not to. So it bought Frank Anderson 4 more years, Emily said, and it bought 40 people a piece of a company, and it bought me a bathroom floor in 2016 where I found out exactly who I was, and it took me 10 more years to be able to look at it. She smiled. Nina, that's not nothing. That's just not a return. Rachel asked her once on a porch about 20 years after, "Do you ever think about that night?" "Which?" "You know which." Emily thought about it. "Not really," she said. "I thought about it every day for about 3 years, then once a week. Then I noticed one time it had been a month and I sat down because it scared me." "Why'd it scare you?" "Because I thought it meant I was losing something." Emily shrugged. "It didn't. It just meant it was over. Things end, Rach. That's actually allowed." He told 200 people. He told 200 people he'd loved somebody else all along," Emily said. "And you know what? He was telling the truth." Rachel turned. "Emily?" "He was," Emily said. "He just had the name wrong." She looked out at the street. "It wasn't Sophia. It was never Sophia. It was a version of himself that never had to say thank you, and he'd been in love with that man since he was 9 years old, and I spent 10 years running an entire life to keep that man alive. I was the set, Rachel. I built the set. That's brutal. It's the truth," Emily said. "And the truth's the only thing that ever helped me. Not the sympathy, not the casseroles, not one person telling me I deserved better. 50 people told me I deserved better, and not one of them helped." She shrugged. "The thing that helped was a dead woman named Ruth Bergman writing a page in 2016 that said what actually happened in order with the names in it. That's all any of this was, Rach. Somebody finally wrote it down." Rachel was quiet. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened," she said, "if he'd just told you in the kitchen alone? No room, no microphone." And Emily Carter smiled. "Yeah," she said, "I'd have forgiven him. I would have, in about 4 days." She said it without a shred of doubt. "I'd have cried, and he'd have cried, and I'd have gotten on the floor with him one more time, and I'd have made him eggs, and we'd have gone to therapy for 8 months and quit, and I'd be 63 years old right now in that house with that man, and I'd know exactly what was in that refrigerator, and I'd never have run a single thing, and I'd have died having never once said, 'I don't know what to do' out loud to anybody." Rachel stared at her. "So he saved you," she said. "No," Emily said. "God, no. Don't give him that. He didn't save me, Rachel. He missed." And she laughed out loud, delighted, 40 years of it coming out at once. "He aimed for my heart in front of 200 people, and he hit the door. That's not grace. That's just bad aim." She was 71 when she stopped working, and Yvonne's grandkids ran the program by then, and Daniel had been gone 2 years, and she still made his 4 dinners on a rotation because she liked them and no other reason. And a woman named Priya came to see her. Not the same Priya. Emily wanted it to be, and it wasn't, and life doesn't do that. This one was a graduate student writing about elder financial exploitation in Illinois, and somebody had given her Nina Bergman Choi's name, and Nina had given her Emily's. "Mrs. Williams." "Carter," Emily said. "I kept Carter, both times. Long story. Not really." "Miss Carter, I want to ask you about the 2016 document, the acknowledgement page. It's cited in about 9 papers now. People call it the Bergman Clause." Emily laughed. "Ruth would have hated that." "Can I ask you something that isn't in the file?" "You can ask." "Why didn't you read it?" the girl said. "For 9 years, you had it. You could have opened it any day." And Emily Carter, 71 years old in a small apartment with a bad radiator she'd never once complained about, thought about a woman standing at a safe deposit box in 2016 with a rubber band in her hand. "Because I thought love meant not looking," she said. The girl wrote it down. "That's what I'd been taught," Emily said. "Since I was a kid. Love means you don't look. Love means you cover it. Love means you carry it and don't mention it and don't make anybody uncomfortable, and you do it forever. And if you do it long enough, they'll love you back." And they don't. "No," Emily said. "They don't. They can't. You can't love a person who's holding your worst thing for you. You can only owe them." She sat back. "That's what nobody tells you. It's not that they're cruel. It's that debt and love can't live in the same room. One of them eats the other one, every time. It took me 40 years to learn that, and I'd like somebody to get it for free." The girl looked up. "So what do you tell people?" she said. "When they ask. Women in their 50s, 60s who've been carrying somebody for 30 years, and they're not sure, and they're scared, and they think it's too late." And Emily Carter, who had once written a woman's name in gold pen at her own kitchen table 11 days before her life ended, sat in a chair in a small apartment and gave the only answer she had. "I tell them the truth," she said. "I tell them nobody's coming. Nobody's going to walk in and choose you and hand you your life back with a bow on it. That's the story you got sold, and it's why you're 60 and still waiting in a kitchen." She leaned forward. "I tell them the day it changes isn't the day somebody finally picks you. It's the day you stop standing in the room where the picking happens." The girl stopped writing. "That's it. That's all of it," Emily said. "Everybody thinks the great moment of my life was in that ballroom. It wasn't. It wasn't the folder either, or the bank, or the vote. Those are just things that happened to me." "Then what was it?" And Emily smiled. "A parking lot," she said. "A Thursday, a dead battery, and a man with jumper cables, and me walking back into a building to say 4 words I'd never said in my life." She stood up, 71 years old, and her hands were steady. "I didn't lose 10 years, she said. "People are always trying to hand me that, and I won't take it. 10 years taught me the exact shape of the thing I do and what it costs and what it isn't. I paid full price and I got the whole education, and there's no refund, and I don't want one." The girl closed her notebook. "Ms. Carter, can I ask one more off the record?" "Sure. Was it worth it?" And Emily Carter, in a chair in a small apartment in the last decade of a life that had been paid for in full, looked at a 26-year-old girl with a notebook and said the thing she'd spent 40 years earning the right to say. "Honey, I spent 10 years waiting for a man to choose me, and one Tuesday in a parking lot, I finally stopped waiting and chose myself instead." She stood and she went to put the kettle on because it was 4 o'clock and nothing was happening and nobody needed anything, and that was the best part of the day.